Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of McDermott family. Mark McDermott was born in the early 1960s in Australia. But we know that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. Known family members include his father, Bruce McDermott, and 2 sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest. According to those close to him, Mark was not only a successful businessman but also a kind and easygoing person. Nicole described her brother as a wonderful person who avoided causing harm to others. Information about Mark's life is limited, especially regarding his adult life. However, we do know for sure that he traveled to the southern United States, although the reasons and circumstances are unclear. It was there that he met Johanna Dunn, a single mother raising a 4-year-old son, Donald Dunn. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia and lived there with his mother's family all his life. His grandparents played a major role in Donald's early upbringing, as they cared for him most of the time. Donald's mother, Johanna, was a single working mother who found raising a child difficult, so she asked her grandparents to help. On the rare occasions when Johanna and Donald were home together, she would often entertain him with video games or television. This reflected Johanna's difficulty in giving her son her full attention, although they tried to make time for each other. Their lives changed when Mark came along. Johanna and Mark quickly fell in love and married. Johanna took her husband's last name, and the 3 of them moved to West Virginia, becoming a happy family. From the beginning, Mark and Donald were very close, as if they were related by blood. Their relatives, including Mark's sister and father, confirmed that Mark treated Donald like his own son, and Donald also considered Mark his only father. The relationship between Donald and Mark was very close, which was evident when Donald was young. During the difficult times when Mark and Johanna were temporarily separated, Donald was still determined to stay with Mark instead of his mother. At the same time, the family faced a great challenge when Johanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, thanks to their support and solidarity, they overcame these difficulties together. Mark always took good care of his stepson, ensuring that Donald had a comfortable and fulfilling life. Although Donald is a simple man and does not ask for much, he is very grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather has created for him. When Donald graduated from high school in 2008, Mark covered the entire cost of his college education. Donald attended Rio Salado College for the first 2 years, then transferred to Marshall University in 2010. Throughout this time, Mark continued to financially support Donald's education. Donald lives with his girlfriend and her family. He and his girlfriend have been in love since they were 15 years old. Despite this, Mark and Johanna have always been very supportive of Donald. They not only pay for Donald's tuition but also support him financially in many other ways. Specifically, they cover the costs of Donald's clothes, car insurance, daily living expenses, and food. Donald dedicates all his time and effort to studying. As a responsible and diligent student, he always strictly follows his daily study schedule. He often refuses or cancels plans to meet friends and relatives, citing the need to complete assignments or study for exams. Donald prioritizes studying above everything else in his life. During his 5 years in college, he always tried his best to graduate on time and not fall behind in any semester. May 25, 2013, a Saturday, was supposed to be the big day when he received his university diploma. However, instead of being the joyous occasion he had planned, the day turned into a heartbreaking moment that would change his life forever. While the McDermott family was preparing for Donald's graduation, an emergency call was placed from their home to 911. Johanna called the police and admitted that she had shot her husband. She insisted that the act was intentional, not an accident. Police quickly arrived at the McDermott family home. Sergeant Greg Kean of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive. When he got to the scene, he noticed that Johanna appeared to be in a state of severe shock. As he entered the home, he found Mark lying motionless on the couch in the living room. He appeared to have been reading a book when he died. Initially, Sergeant Greg noticed that he had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. However, when investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound behind the shoulder. The medical examiner at the scene confirmed that the cause of death was head injuries, but it was possible that Mark did not die immediately after being shot. There was a lot of blood at the crime scene, suggesting that Mark had been losing blood over time before his death. According to initial reports, Donald was taking a shower to prepare for his important day. The sound of the running water from the shower drowned out the gunshots. So Donald did not hear Johanna shoot her stepfather. It was only when Donald emerged from the shower that he discovered Mark's body in the living room. On the dining room table was a pistol and a letter, presumably written by Johanna to Donald's son. In the letter, Johanna expressed her grief and explained that her marriage had become unbearable. She could no longer live with a man she did not love anymore. Johanna also apologized for leaving Donald's life when he was still a minor. At that time, Johanna and Donald were taken to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office in a private car, where a police officer took their statements. Since Johanna was the one who called the police, the incident was initially treated as a serious case of domestic violence. In the call to the dispatcher, Johanna stated that after an argument with Mark, she had shot him in the head with a pistol in a fit of rage without realizing what she was doing. However, she later changed her story, denying what she had said before. This caught the police by surprise and forced them to adjust the entire investigation. After getting into the police car, Johanna suddenly revealed the truth that it was not her, but her son Donald who killed Mark. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. The story was actually much more complicated than what the investigators initially thought. Johanna entered the interrogation room and met with Captain James Barr from the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office. She detailed the events that had occurred on May 25, 2013. According to Johanna, her son was scheduled to attend his graduation that morning. Before that, she had gone out to run some errands and buy groceries. Johanna had just arrived home and was about to get out of the car when Donald approached her. He asked his mother to close her eyes and follow him into the house, saying that there was a surprise. Trusting her son, Johanna complied and walked into the dining room. Donald told his mother to sit down. Suddenly, Johanna heard a distinct clicking sound. When she opened her eyes to look at her son, she was horrified to see Donald pointing his own pistol at her. The gun failed to fire, and Johanna panicked, trying to wrestle it from her son. She tried to calm down, think clearly, and make a plan to save herself from becoming Donald's victim. Seeing Mark's body, she quickly told her son that she would call 911 and take the blame for him. Although Donald was initially skeptical, he eventually agreed to his mother's plan. During her interrogation, Johanna explained why she called 911 and incriminated herself. She did so to protect herself from Donald, even though she knew she would go to jail. She believed that if she did not, Donald would kill her. Johanna expressed shock that her son would point the gun at her head and pull the trigger, something she never thought would happen in her 23 years of being a mother. The gun belonged to her. She explained that the reason the gun did not fire was probably because Donald had pulled the trigger of the semi-automatic gun too far, preventing it from firing normally. Captain James thought Johanna's story was very plausible. From the moment he met Donald, he felt something was wrong. He noticed that Donald, a 23-year-old young man, was too calm for this serious situation. His face always remained neutral, showing no emotion. Therefore, he decided to put him in a separate interrogation room, away from his mother. From the beginning of the interrogation, Donald denied any involvement in his stepfather's death. However, after being informed of Johanna's testimony, his denial quickly collapsed. James did not need to use any threats or pressure to force Donald to confess. Instead, he voluntarily recounted the whole incident, revealing every detail of the case. The story Donald told was almost unbelievable. This story begins after Donald completed his first year of college. It was clear that his academic performance was not good, and due to his low grades, he decided to drop out of school. Donald shared that at first, his courses were easy and he could get good grades just by showing up to class on time. As the semester progressed, he encountered more and more difficulties in his studies. He felt that he was not capable of continuing. Instead of admitting the truth, he decided to lie to Mark and Johanna. Not only were his close friends deceived, but his girlfriend and her family were also unaware of his true situation. According to Rachel Rush, Donald's girlfriend's sister, he created a false impression that he was studying. Donald maintained a student-like schedule, leaving and returning home at fixed times. He spent most of the day in his room and asked not to be disturbed, citing the need to focus on homework or studying for exams. To create a more convincing appearance, Donald even falsified his transcripts. This was a deliberate deception that lasted for 4.5 years. No one in Donald's life realized that he was lying to them. Donald's family trusted him completely during the time he pretended to be a student. Johanna and Mark had no idea that their son had abused the financial and emotional support they had given him all this time. Donald admitted that he had no intention of deceiving his family at first, but as time went on, it became more and more difficult to confess the truth. The main reason he could not tell the truth was because he was afraid that Mark and Johanna would stop paying for all his expenses. Although he appeared to not care much about material things like cars or expensive clothes, he did not want to give up his current lifestyle. He was well aware that he would lose a lot if his parents found out the truth. For a long time, Donald had been meticulously planning to escape all trouble. From the beginning, he had planned to kill his parents to avoid suspicion. Donald planned to leave a note similar to the one found on the dining table along with the pistol. He believed that when the police read the note, they would conclude that this was the crime of an unhappy woman who saw no other way but to kill herself. Donald told Captain James that on May 25th, he had secretly taken Johanna's pistol and kept it with him all day, pretending to be preparing for his graduation ceremony. Before carrying out the rest of his plan, he decided to go to the supermarket to have his image recorded by the surveillance cameras, in order to use this evidence to prove his innocence. Before the murder, Donald had begun to show an interest in shooting practice. Although his best friend Alex Willis found this strange, Alex did not suspect anything as he did not think Donald would want to use a gun to attack someone. Donald's considerations and conclusions left everyone who heard them afterwards confused. James shared that this young man admitted that he had even planned the emotions he would express on his face when the police arrived at the scene. He also thought about how he would support himself after losing the steady income provided by Mark, and decided to take advantage of the sympathy of his loved ones as long as he could. While his family supported him, he decided to take up sports to improve his health and fitness. If he had no other choice, he would consider joining the police force or the army. When considering the possibility of his plan succeeding, Donald realized that it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to admit that he had been lying to them for nearly 5 years. In April 2016, the West Virginia Supreme Court released a legal opinion. According to the opinion, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder 1 month after his arrest in June 2013. Even before the trial, Donald and his legal team sought to delay the trial. A few weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, the defendant, Donald Dunn, who had been held in solitary confinement, underwent surgery on his right hand. His attorneys used the surgery as a reason to request a delay, arguing that during the initial hearings, he would be under the influence of strong painkillers. To decide this issue, the court first requested his medical records. However, this request was denied on the grounds that, at the preliminary hearing, there was no evidence that Donald was partially incapacitated due to the use of painkillers. Therefore, the court determined that he was competent to attend trial and approved the continuation of the scheduled trial. The trial took place in August 2014, over a year after Mark's death. It was presided over by Judge John Hutchinson, with David White representing Donald and Christine Keller from the Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's two sisters, along with one of their nieces, traveled more than 15,000 kilometers from Australia to attend the trial of the man they had considered a family member for nearly 20 years. Although there were no details from witness testimony or evidence presented to the jury, and no photographs or video footage, the defense wanted to include in their opening argument that Donald was under the influence of illegal drugs at the time of the crime. However, there was no evidence that this had ever been mentioned before or confirmed by any toxicology tests. On August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was convicted of the murder of his stepfather, Mark McDermott, the attempted murder of his mother, Johanna McDermott, and the use of a firearm. About a month later, on September 5 of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald Dunn to life in prison without parole for the murder of his stepfather and 15 years in prison for the attempted murder of his mother. After the verdict was announced, Johanna read an emotional letter to the court. In the letter, Donald's mother mentioned that something unfortunate had happened in her son's life. This could have been due to the decline in health of his grandparents, the pressure she put on him to go to college, or his exposure to violent video games at a very young age. She expressed her disapproval of the way her son was perceived by the public and stated that she did not agree with his sentence. However, Judge John explained that Johanna's objections did not affect his decision. He felt that the sentence he imposed was the only way to restore justice in an unjust situation. He sympathized with the defendant's mother, who, despite the circumstances, wanted to protect her son from the consequences of his actions. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father still could not understand how Donald could take the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Candy Rogers. Candace Rogers, also known as Candy, was born on July 18, 1948, was either. After her birth, her parents divorced, but her father remained in the same city, allowing Candy to spend time with him regularly. As a child, she enjoyed the outdoors, often going for walks and playing with her dog. She also dreamed of joining the Campfire Girls, a girls-only organization similar to the Boy Scouts. In 1959, Candy joined the Campfire Girls at the age of 9. One of the organization's activities was selling mints door-to-door. On Friday, March 6th, she planned to sell mints after school. After returning home, having dinner, and playing with her dog. Then she took about 8 boxes of mints and headed out. Candy had planned to walk around her neighborhood and sell sweets to the people living nearby. To ensure that the other girls selling sweets in the area didn't overlap, each girl was assigned specific streets to visit. However, when Candy failed to return home by her expected time of 6 p.m., her mom started to worry. Candy's mom and grandfather set out to search for her, but they couldn't find her anywhere in the neighborhood. As darkness fell, the search party grew, with family, friends and neighbors joining in to help. Despite their combined efforts, they were unable to find any sign of Candy. Convinced that something was wrong, Candy's mom decided to call the police. As the police joined the search, they began by questioning the neighbors. Their investigation revealed that she had only made one sale, suggesting that something may have happened to her soon after she left home. A witness reported seeing Candy on a nearby street around 6:30 p.m., which seemed unusual since her mother was already searching for her by then. Candy's grandfather reported some unusual incidents after going to search for his granddaughter. On the same street where a witness last saw Candy, he nearly got hit by a speeding green 1956 Ford. Although the police distributed the car's description, they were unable to locate it due to the lack of a license plate number. Later, at around 9 p.m., several mint boxes belonging to Candy were found along the road near a bridge, increasing the concern for her safety. The police intensified their search in this area, combing the riverbanks and a nearby wooded zone throughout the night. Unfortunately, Candy was not found. As news of Candy's disappearance spread, local newspapers covered the story, and it eventually gained statewide media attention. In 1959, child disappearances near their homes were extremely rare, making Candy's case even more disturbing. The residents of her town had not experienced a similar incident in many years, leaving them deeply shaken and concerned. The next morning, police increased their search by deploying more personnel and resources, including mounted police, off-road vehicles, and military members. A large number of volunteers from the city and surrounding areas joined the search, swelling the total number of search to over 1,000 people. This made it one of the largest searches in the country's history at the time. The search area was expanded to 11 miles around Candy's home, but despite this, no signs of her were found. Tragically, on the same day, a search helicopter clipped power lines and crashed, claiming the lives of 3 of its 5 crew members. Undeterred, the search efforts continued for many days, but yielded no results. Police officers worked tirelessly in multiple day and night to try and locate Candy. Investigators also followed up on approximately 750 tips received in the early days of the search, but unfortunately, every lead ended in a dead end. 15 days after Candy went missing, 2 military personnel on a hunting trip in the woods west of Spokane stumbled upon children's shoes on the ground. Recognizing the shoes as possibly belonging to Candy, they immediately reported their discovery to the police. The shoes were confirmed by Candy's grandfather. He said they were indeed hers. After discovering this clue, police conducted a search of the woods and they quickly found Candy's body, partially hidden in the underbrush and covered with pine branches. A medical examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation, using a torn piece of fabric from Candy's own skirt. Injuries on Candy's hands and feet suggested that she had been tied up, although no ropes were found near. The police investigation showed that Candy had been sexually abused. During their search of the crime scene, the police discovered a green car seat cover nearby, although they were unable to establish if it was linked to the murder. A small, purple stain was also found on Candy's clothing, which gave off a strong scent of grape-flavored chewing gum. Despite all efforts, the police still could not find relevance between this stain and the case. With limited clues, police searched for any clues that might help them find the killer. They thoroughly investigated numerous tips and looked into the potential involvement of hundreds of people. This group included neighbors, people of interest, and previously convicted individuals. However, the investigation eventually narrowed down to focus on one particular suspect, Alfred Braves, a 50-year-old man. The reason Alfred became a suspect because, on the same day Candy's body was found, he died in his car, near where Candy's boxes of mints were found. Additionally, Alfred lived near Candy's home. Upon finding his body, police discovered a rope and a strand of hair that was not Alfred's, which belonged to a woman. Investigators obtained a search warrant for Alfred's home. Upon searching his house, they discovered numerous newspaper articles detailing sex crimes against women and girls. The police also found that several women had accused him of harassment, and even his own wife had suspicions about his involvement in Candy's murder. However, despite the suspicious circumstances, the police were unable to find any concrete evidence that directly linked Alfred to the crime, and investigators were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. In the face of a lack of evidence, detectives shifted their focus to other suspects. Over several months, the police diligently investigated each person, but every lead turned out to be a dead end. Later, investigators found another suspect, a serial killer named Hugh Morse. He was arrested in 1961 for a string of crimes. The important evidence that Hugh was involved in Candy's case was that he had a habit of chewing grape-flavored gum, which was similar to a substance found on Candy's clothes. Furthermore, additionally, he had committed 2 murders in Spokane a few months after Candy's death, further increasing the suspicion of his involvement in the crime. Hugh began committing crimes quite early. His first arrest was for assaulting a woman, but the penalty was lenient. He was merely discharged from the army. He then went on to commit multiple robberies in Los Angeles and served only a 6-month sentence. After being released, Hugh tricked 2 8-year-old girls into going with him to a secluded area by promising them ice cream. He then sexually assaulted them. This crime led to his arrest. However, instead of going to prison, a medical commission determined that he was a sexual psychopath. As a result, he was placed in a mental health facility for a period of 2 years to receive treatment. After his release, doctors thought Hugh had fully recovered. He then moved to Spokane, where he began peeping into women's windows. His actions took a more severe turn in November 1959, when he broke into the home of a 28-year-old woman and acted violently, ultimately killing her. 10 months later, Hugh entered the residence of a 69-year-old woman, repeating the same crimes as before. A month after that, he assaulted another woman, stabbing her multiple times. Although she sustained severe injuries, she managed to survive the attack. After escaping the city, he continued a devastating crime spree over several months, brutally attacking and sexually assaulting numerous women and girls with a knife, ultimately claiming the lives of 2 more victims. To evade capture, Hugh constantly moved from city to city and state to state, until the FBI intervened. He was eventually added to the list of the country's 10 most wanted fugitives, which ultimately led to his capture. Hugh received multiple life sentences, but his troubles didn't end there. He attempted to end his life in his cell. Fortunately, the guards intervened in time and saved him, allowing him to continue serving his sentence. Detectives in Candy's case visited Hugh in prison multiple times, trying to gather information about the case. Despite repeatedly denying any involvement, he took a polygraph test to prove his innocence. The test results suggested he was telling the truth, but these results are considered unreliable and therefore cannot be used as evidence in court. At the time of the murder, Hugh lived in Spokane, and furthermore, he had a criminal record of similar incidents that made investigators suspicious. They initially considered him the primary suspect due to he familiar with this neighborhood. But he consistently denied any involvement. Although they suspected him, they did not have enough evidence to conclude his involvement in the crime. The police then shifted their attention to another suspect, 49-year-old Howard Barnett. He was arrested in February 1960 for allegedly molesting a minor girl. Shortly after his arrest, he ended his life right in his cell at the Spokane police station. Hugh wrote a cryptic message in his own blood on the wall before his death, stating, "He have a sin before the Lord." However, it wasn't until after he passed away that his wife became aware of his arrest. She then asked the police if they thought Hugh might have been involved in Candy's death. Despite several investigations, no concrete evidence was found to connect Hugh to the crime. The police continued to pursue new leads over the years, looking into other possible suspects. A woman came forward with information, stating that on the day of Candy's disappearance, she saw a green car following her. Police reopened the case multiple times but were unable to gather evidence linking the green car or any other. The case was reopened periodically over the years but always hit a dead end. The investigation into Candy's murder was complicated by numerous false confessions. 13 individuals came forward claiming to be the killer, but when questioned by the police, they couldn't provide any details that only the real killer would know. Instead, they simply repeated details they had read in the newspapers. The police department changed personnel a lot during the investigation. However, none were able to solve the case, allowing Candy's murder to remain one of the state's most notorious and baffling crimes. The crime had a profound impact on the local community, leading many parents to reevaluate their perception of safety and ultimately changing the way they supervised their children's outdoor activities. In the early 2000s, the case was reopened, and a new detective used modern technologies to help with the investigation. Fortunately, the police had collected and preserved crucial evidence in 1959, which allowed experts to take another look. By using modern DNA analysis, they were able to identify a male semen sample on the Candy's clothing. Further analysis of the DNA sample was done to create a profile, which was then entered into the FBI database, but yielded no matches. Investigators also compared the DNA to samples from multiple suspects, but none of them matched. For many years, people suspected Hugh Morse of committing the crime, but forensic evidence revealed no link between him and the murder. As a result, the investigation stalled once again. Although the police had a DNA sample from the perpetrator who sexually assaulted and killed Candy, identifying the individual continued to elude them. In 2021, authorities reopened the case, and a new detective chose to use genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge DNA analysis method, had already solved numerous cold cases. By applying this innovative approach, the detective hoped that the case will be solved. The detective reached out to several labs that specialized in the analysis he needed, but they all shared the same frustrating news. They concluded the sample had deteriorated too much, making it impossible to extract the necessary information. Undeterred, the detective contacted one final lab, and it has provided new clues that are helpful to the investigation. Armed with state-of-the-art tools, the experts were able to analyze the sample successfully and generate a DNA profile of the perpetrator. This profile was then uploaded to genealogical databases, allowing investigators to begin searching for the DNA owner's relatives. After carefully examining thousands of individuals, then they narrowed down their focus to one specific family. Upon investigating this family, the investigators discovered that the DNA sample likely came from one of three brothers, but all three brothers had passed away. However, one of the brothers had a living daughter. The police reached out to her about the possibility that her father might have been involved in the murder. Despite her initial shock, she agreed to cooperate with the investigation. The woman provided a DNA sample, which was compared to the semen found on Candy's clothing. The results confirmed that she was closely related to culprit, who left the DNA evidence on Candy's clothing. Based on this new information, the police obtained a court order to exhume the woman's father's grave. DNA experts extracted a DNA profile from his remains and compared it to the semen found on Candy's clothing. After a 62-year wait, the results revealed a definitive match between the DNA from the woman's father and the semen found on Candy's clothing. This confirmed that the perpetrator was a man named John Ryhoff. John Ryhoff was not initially identified as a suspect following Candy's murder. However, detectives later investigated his biography and found links to other crimes. At the time of the murder, John was 20 years old and lived within a mile of Candy's house. He was also stationed at an army base near where her body was discovered. 2 years after the murder, John committed another crime when he attacked a woman, binding and sexually assaulting her, then attempting to kill her. The woman managed to survive the attack. As a result of the assault, John was arrested and sentenced to 6 months in prison. He also received a dishonorable discharge from the army. Upon his release from prison, John started a family and has 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. He kept a low profile and appeared to be living an ordinary life, working multiple jobs. One of these jobs was at a food packaging plant, where he suffered a severe chemical burn to his face and leaving a scar. John finally ended his life in June 1970 at the age of 31, leaving no note or explanation. The authorities determined that the victim, Candy, may have known her killer, John. Candy's friend, who was 10 years old at the time of the murder, was revealed to be the killer's sister. Years later, she recalled how she cried in her brother's, John's arms after learning about Candy's death. Unaware that he was the person responsible. Sadly, Candy's parents did not live to see their daughter's case solved. Candy's mother passed away in 2006, and her father died life in 1963, for years after Candy's murder, likely due to his inability to cope with his loss. After 62 years, the case was finally solved, marking one of the longest investigations in history. The investigation involved multiple detectives from different generations. At the press conference announcing the killer's identity, only one officer who worked on the case in 1959 was present. He expressed gratitude for having lived long enough to see the case resolved and to finally know the truth. The daughter of the killer, John Hoff, initially struggled to accept that her father committed such a heinous crime. However, she eventually came to terms with the fact, describing her father as a monster who took an innocent girl's life. She has expressed regret that her father was not held accountable for his actions during his lifetime. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Miriam Bielte. Miriam Bielte grew up in Hildesheim, Germany, where she excelled in school. After completing her studies, she was accepted into the University of Hanover, where she studied mechanical engineering for 5 years and earned a master's degree immediately after graduation. She found a good job as an engineer at a small design company a few years later. In mid-2018, she changed jobs to work for a larger car manufacturer, where she took on the role of design engineer. In 2019, Miriam lived in her hometown of Hildesheim. She was not in a serious relationship, so she continued to live with her parents. She worked for an international company and frequently traveled abroad. At the end of March 2019, the company sent her on another business trip, this time to Southeast Asia, to meet with some suppliers. Miriam took additional leave to combine work with vacation. Miriam decided to extend her stay in Thailand. She had heard about the beautiful beaches and rich history of the country and wanted to experience this beauty firsthand. After completing her business negotiations with the suppliers, she boarded a flight to Bangkok. Although traveling alone can be risky, Miriam is experienced and knows how to navigate a foreign country safely. She prioritized her safety during her short vacation by following some important rules, avoiding going out alone after dark, keeping her valuables safe, and always being wary of strangers. Unfortunately, we cannot predict other people's intentions, making it difficult to know whether they might cause us harm. Soon after arriving in Bangkok, she took a trip to Pattaya, located in the southeast of Thailand. Just off the coast was Koh Si Chang, an island she wanted to explore. On Sunday, April 7, 2019, at the age of 20, Miriam bought a ferry ticket to Koh Si Chang for a few hours, planning to return to Pattaya in the evening. Her simple goal was to enjoy fresh local seafood, visit some of the island's ancient temples, and soak up the seaside atmosphere. By noon, Miriam had arrived on the island. She quickly rented a motorbike, a common mode of transportation in Thailand. Using Google Maps, she planned her route and set off on her adventure. One of her destinations was a white stone temple located on a hilltop. The temple was famous for housing the footprint of the Buddha and was established by the ruling Chakri dynasty, making it important to Buddhists. The temple was tucked away in a quiet location. Miriam loved being in peaceful places, away from the hustle and bustle of tourists. She had no idea what awaited her there. after reaching her destination. Miriam parked her motorbike near the flower stall at the foot of the hill. She greeted the vendor and headed toward the temple. The hike ahead was challenging and best suited for those in good physical condition. Surveillance footage captured Miriam climbing the stone steps to the monument, however. Miriam ascended the steps but never returned. This was puzzling because the stone steps were the only way down the hill. Her rented motorbike remained parked at the foot of the hill, near the flower stall. Although the temple is situated on a beautiful hill, there are no other attractions nearby, making it unclear why she took so long and why she did not return. As night fell and she had not yet contacted anyone, her relatives in Germany began to worry that something might have happened to her. The next morning, April 8, a Thai tourist walked along a deserted path leading to the white stone temple that housed the footprint of the Buddha. About halfway up, he noticed a small ravine beside the stairs. Curious, he went closer and was shocked to discover the body of a young woman with fair skin. She was found dead, lying between two large boulders, covered in branches, leaves, and old debris. The visitor quickly alerted the police to the gruesome discovery. Officers rapidly climbed the hillside to the site where the body was discovered. The victim was identified as a German woman named Miriam Beelte. After examining the scene, police determined that her death was not an accident. Miriam was found with a broken leg and multiple injuries to her head and face, consistent with being struck by a heavy object, such as a brick or stone. It was tragic when it was discovered that Miriam had been abused before her death. However, the exact circumstances surrounding her death remain unclear. The stone shrine dedicated to the Buddha has only one entrance and exit, which was monitored by a surveillance camera that recorded Miriam as she climbed the hill. It was soon revealed that an unidentified young man had been seen going up the stairs with Miriam, making him the prime suspect. The police quickly identified him. Security footage showed him arriving on a motorbike and parking at the foot of the hill. He spoke briefly to the florist and bought a small bouquet of marigolds before heading to the temple. The florist noticed the young man closely following Miriam and then saw him walking down the stone stairs alone. He was wearing dark clothes, and the florist thought his jacket and pants looked wet and had something red on them. Concerned, the florist asked the young man if everything was okay. The man said he had just fallen, sensing something was wrong. The florist tried to recall the young man's appearance and noted down the model of his motorbike and the license plate number. The florist then shared his observations about the suspicious man with the police. The police discovered that the motorbike belonged to a 24-year-old man named Ronakorn Romruin, a local resident of Koh Sichang Island. Ronakorn lived alone and owned a small boat as well as a motorbike. He worked as a beach cleaner during the day, where he paddled around in the boat, collected trash, and cleaned the beach. Locals described him as a quiet and solitary man after work. Ronakorn would often go home, watch TV, and drink beer, leading a lifestyle similar to many other young people his age. However, few knew that he was struggling with serious personal problems. Ronakorn battled drug addiction and regularly used methamphetamine. The day after Miriam was murdered, Ronakorn was arrested as he returned home from work in the evening. He was taken to the police station for questioning, and a few hours later, he confessed to the crime. Ronakorn stated that on the morning of Sunday, April 7, he woke up, skipped breakfast, drank 2 beers. He then used methamphetamine and got on his motorbike to travel around the island. His trip ended at the foot of a temple. Ronakorn spotted Miriam as she was climbing the stone stairs. At that moment, an idea struck him when he saw an attractive girl with fair skin at the foot of the hill. He noticed a flower stall and bought a small bouquet of marigolds. Ronakorn then followed Miriam up the stairs. When he caught up with her, he tried to strike up a conversation. Miriam felt uncomfortable, and after he gave her the flowers, he suggested they could be intimate on the hill. before going to the temple. Miriam refused, but Runcorn continued to ask inappropriate questions. Miriam became frightened and tried to run away from the stranger, but he kept chasing her. Eventually, he grabbed her and dragged her into the dense forest. Miriam screamed and struggled to escape, but there was no one around to help her. After he completed what he intended to do, Miriam found an opportunity to escape. She ran down the hill, putting as much distance as possible between herself and him. Meanwhile, Runcorn had a disturbing thought. He realized he needed to catch up with her to eliminate any possibility of being caught. If he let her go, he would likely end up in jail. Runcorn stood up, dusted himself off, and ran after Miriam. Unfortunately, in her panic, while descending the hill, she fell and injured her leg. Runcorn caught up to her and picked up a large rock from the ground. Hitting her on the head, Miriam died from the injury. Runcorn then dragged her up the hill, placed her on a rocky spot, and covered her with leaves, twigs, and old rubbish. However, the body was eventually discovered by a Thai tourist after committing the crime. Runcorn returned home, quickly washed his bloody clothes, lay down on the couch, watched TV, and finished a pack of cigarettes. This was his last evening of freedom during the reenactment of the crime scene. Runcorn recounted the final moments of Miriam's life while his head was covered with a blue bag. To protect his identity, Thai police closely monitored the investigation, and just 3 months after the tragedy, the trial began. The main evidence against Runcorn included surveillance camera footage, a witness's testimony from the flower stall, and Runcorn's own confession, although Runcorn did not directly apologize for his actions. His mother did so in court on his behalf. The mother said that she and Runcorn did not live together and were unaware of her son's actions. His actions shocked her, and she urged the court to impose the harshest sentence on him. In Thailand, the maximum penalty for murder is the death penalty. Runcorn's mother feared that if he were released, he might commit a similar crime and take the lives of others. She supported the court in imposing the death penalty on her son. Runcorn is currently awaiting execution. The island community was horrified by the news of the death of 26-year-old Miriam. Thailand is generally a peaceful country, and it is sad that a local man would treat a tourist so cruelly. Koh Si Chang has never seen such brutality before, and the residents hope this incident will not disrupt their lives or deter visitors. The Koh Si Chang community came together to express their grief. People of all ages and occupations gathered at the site of Miriam's death. Carrying candles and flowers, they mourned, prayed for her soul, and offered their condolences to her family. Thailand's economy is heavily dependent on tourism, and negative publicity can be very damaging to the country's economy. This is why the Thai authorities prioritize the swift resolution of crimes involving tourists. However, there are times when details of such cases are kept under wraps and not shared with the public. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Ashley Fallis. Ashley Fallis married her high school sweetheart right after finishing school, but their marriage lasted only a few years. During that time, she had 2 daughters. When the relationship ended, Ashley, just over 20 years old, she returned to her hometown with her children to live near her mother, Jenna, and stepfather, Joel. She found work as a respiratory therapist, helping patients with breathing and heart issues, became the sole provider for her family. Life was difficult, as her ex-husband was not involved in raising their daughters. Despite these hardships, Ashley was described by her mother and stepfather as cheerful, kind, and funny. She and her mother were particularly close, sharing a bond like best friends. In April 2007, Ashley met Tom Fallis, who seemed responsible and ready for family life. Unlike her ex-husband, their relationship progressed quickly, and a few months later, Ashley became pregnant with her third child. 9 months later, they welcomed a son, Blake. 2 weeks after Blake's birth, Ashley and Tom got married. Tom also adopted Ashley's older daughters, however. Ashley's mother and stepfather felt she had rushed into having another child, like marrying Tom, and entrusting him with her daughters despite knowing him for only a short time. The family settled in Evans, a small town about an hour north of Denver, Colorado. Ashley continued her work as a respiratory therapist, while Tom took a job as a correctional officer with the Weld County Sheriff's Office. Jenna admitted she found Tom strange from the start. She said, "I didn't like his mindset. He always thought he was right about everything." Tom came across as aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling toward Ashley. Jenna often tried to convince Ashley to leave her relationship with Tom. Things took a dramatic turn when their youngest son, Blake, was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, a condition causing fluid to build up in the brain. Ashley became focused on researching treatment options for Blake, who had to undergo several major surgeries and required constant care. The stress severely affected Ashley, leaving her depressed, anxious, and irritable. Caring for Blake's health also put a heavy strain on Ashley and Tom's relationship, leading to frequent arguments. By the summer of 2011, Ashley started contemplating divorce. However, Tom encouraged her to seek help from a psychotherapist. After starting medication, Ashley's mental health improved, and their relationship appeared to stabilize. By December 2011, the Fallis family decided to host a New Year's Eve party at their home, inviting family and friends. The preparations for the holiday provided a much distraction from their challenges. Just a few days before the celebration, Ashley discovered she was pregnant again. Filled with joy, she chose to stop taking her medication to protect the baby. For a brief moment, it seemed things were improving for the Fallis family, and thoughts of divorce faded away. Unfortunately, their happiness was short-lived. On the afternoon of December 31, 2011, Ashley started bleeding and feared she was having a miscarriage. Despite her worry, she continued getting ready for the party. That evening, guests started arriving at the Fallis' home, including Tom's parents, Ashley's mother and stepfather, her uncle, and several family friends. The atmosphere was lively as everyone enjoyed chatting and celebrating together. However, tension between Tom and Ashley became evident. They exchanged harsh remarks and occasionally argued during the evening. Ashley confided in a friend, saying she always knew that Tom hates her. Despite the conflict, Ashley and Tom still celebrated the new year with their guests as the party wound down and people began leaving. Ashley's uncle offered her illegal substances. Tom overheard this and became enraged. He scolded Ashley and accused her of unacceptable behavior. In the heat of the argument, Tom revealed to everyone that Ashley's fourth pregnancy had ended earlier that day. He shouted that Ashley always followed her mother's advice rather than thinking for herself. After the quarrel, Ashley went to put her children to bed while her parents prepared to leave at 12:40 a.m. Ashley stepped outside to say goodbye to her mother and stepfather, noticing that Ashley seemed upset. Her mother, Jenna, asked what was wrong. Ashley responded, "It's okay, Mom. It's just Tom. He's like that." She hugged her parents goodbye while Tom stood on the porch, waving as they drove away. Afterward, Ashley and Tom went back inside the house, where the atmosphere was tense, following a brief argument about illegal substances. The two went their separate ways. Tom went into the wardrobe to change when he suddenly heard the sound of a weapon being loaded in the bedroom. Knowing Ashley kept a weapon under her mattress, Tom shouted, asking what was going on, and hurried toward the bedroom. Before he could reach her, he heard the explosion. Tom rushed into the room and found Ashley lying on the floor, smoke lingering in the air. She had been injured in the back of the head. In a panic, Tom grabbed her, pressed his hand against the wound to stop the bleeding, and called 911 at 12:50 a.m. as Ashley lay unconscious but still alive. Tom gently closed her eyes and spoke to her, saying, "I'm here. You won't go. You won't leave me." In the early hours of New Year's Day, 2012, the Evans Police Department responded to an emergency call from the Fallis family home. The neighborhood was known to be safe, with low crime rates. Upon arrival, paramedics rushed Ashley to the hospital due wound to her head. Unfortunately, her injuries were critical, and Ashley passed away a few hours later. The police detained Tom at the scene. He was covered in blood and claimed that his wife had self-harm. He also mentioned that Ashley and her mother had attended a party earlier that evening, and Ashley had been very upset, however. Suspicions quickly arose when a neighbor reported hearing screams from the house. The neighbor stated she heard Ashley screaming, begging Tom to get off her and let her go. During his interrogation, Tom denied the accusations. He stated that he did not witness his wife pulling the trigger and denied assaulting her. At any time during the interrogation, investigators asked Tom to undress so they could examine his body. They found fresh scratches on his chest. Tom explained the scratches by claiming he had injured himself while shaving his chest for the first time, which caused itching throughout the questioning. Tom appeared visibly nervous and anxious, but consistently denied having any physical contact with Ashley. In the Fallis bedroom, significant evidence suggested that a conflict had occurred. Photographs had been torn off the wall, hinting at a fight, and divorce papers were found displayed on the wall. Ashley also had bruises on her legs, according to Ashley's mother. Tom had been very angry with them when they said goodbye at the party. At the end of the party, he even shouted, "I want you all to die." Despite this evidence, Tom was released without charges. After the interrogation, Ashley's parents were heartbroken and couldn't understand why he was released so easily. Jenna was convinced that her daughter would never willingly leave her children. Ashley loved life and had plans for the future. On January 5, 2012, the medical examiner concluded that Ashley had died from a weapon wound to the back of the head and ruled it self-harm. 2 months later, the case was officially closed. Ashley's grieving parents struggled to accept this conclusion. Eventually, Tom and his children moved to Indiana, where he pursued graduate school. Despite their suspicions, Ashley's parents tried to maintain a good relationship with Tom to stay connected with their grandchildren. However, they never stopped believing that their daughter's death was caused by Tom. 2 years passed until, in early 2014, a local television reporter, Justin Joseph, began his own investigation into the Ashley Fallis case. Joseph spent months interviewing neighbors and investigating the case. After 4 months, the case took a significant turn. A young neighbor of Tom, his name is Nick Glover, revealed an important detail to Joseph. Nick and his mother, Kathy Glover, claimed he heard Tom yelling at his parents outside the house, saying, "God, I can't believe I did this." When his parents asked, "What are you saying?" Tom reportedly yelled, "I attacked her." Nick had informed the police immediately after the tragedy, and his statement was written down. However, no mention of Nick Glover's and Kathy account was found in the official police report. Joseph's report also uncovered another person who confirmed that Tom had confessed. A local police was present at the scene of the tragedy stated that Tom admitted to attack Ashley. Another neighbor also told the reporter that, on the night of the incident, she had called to the police, saying Tom attacked his wife. However, the police report misrepresented this information, stating instead that a woman had called to report that Ashley had self-harm. She also told the police that she had heard Ashley screaming from the Fallis family home, saying, "Leave me alone." Despite this, at that time, the neighbor was not questioned further, which was considered a serious omission since she was a key witness that night. Ashley's parents believed the police had rushed to close the case and blamed Ashley for her own death. Despite the circumstantial evidence, thanks to Joseph's investigative work, Chief Rick Brandt began to reevaluate the case and the actions of his officers, who had quickly hushed it up. This time, the Fort Collins Police Department took over the investigation. They considered the testimonies of the neighbors who heard Ashley screaming. Tom continued to deny his involvement in Ashley's death, maintaining that she had pulled the trigger herself on New Year's Eve. Curiously, more than 2 years after Ashley's death. Tom handed over to the police what he claimed was a suicide note written by Ashley. The note read, "Dear Tom, I am sorry for your pain. I am a loser in everything. I don't even love my daughters and son. I love you, but I just can't stand this life anymore." In November 2014, Tom Fallis was charged with the death of Ashley Fallis. He was detained and arrested in Indiana after 3 years of freedom, thinking he had escaped justice. In March 2016, a trial was held against Tom. During the trial, Tom's lawyer argued that he could not have killed his beloved wife, the mother of his 3 children. The lawyer claimed that Ashley had been struggling with mental health issues. He presented documents showing that Ashley had been diagnosed with a mental illness in the summer of 2011. The defense argued that she was impulsive, prone to self-destruction, and had been very drunk on the night of her death. They also claimed that she had suffered a miscarriage on New Year's Eve, further contributing to her distress. Ashley's uncle, however, stated that their family did not believe Ashley had taken her self-harm. They were convinced that Tom was responsible for her death. Ashley's therapist also insisted that his patient had no self-destructive tendencies. He confirmed that she was taking certain medications. However, the doctor did not know that. In addition to them, she was prescribed prescription medicine from other specialists. Ashley apparently hid another important thing from the doctor. Information, including the alleged suicide notes she wrote. It turned out that Ashley had written 2 similar notes, one of which was dated July 24, 2011. Ashley's mother, Jenna, insisted that her daughter was fine. But Tom behaved inappropriately that night. He was overly angry and aggressive toward her and toward Ashley. Jenna said that at the end of the party, she watched as Tom walked up the stairs, stood right in front of Ashley, and told Ashley, "I hate you all, and I wish you all died." Then he went into the bedroom and slammed the door loudly. Rick also testified at the trial, confirming that he heard Tom confess to his parents that he attacked his wife. However, his parents denied this information and fully supported their son. A forensic expert who spent 400 hours studying the case explained to the jury where Ashley's head should have been when the explosion rang out. The expert claimed Ashley pulled the trigger herself. The prosecution called a second world-renowned forensic expert, who told the jury that he had come to the opposite conclusion from the previous medical examiner. In his opinion, Tom was next to Ashley at the time of the explosion, and most likely, there was a struggle between the spouses for the weapon, in which Tom won. The jury took only 3.5 hours to reach their verdict. Tom was found not guilty of second-degree murder and of all less serious crimes. Tom was free again. He refused to give any comments to journalists and the media. The jury explained that they believed that Ashley was mentally ill, which is why she self-harmed. Ashley's parents still don't believe that their daughter could abandon 3 children and voluntarily end her life. They are very upset that Tom was released. Ashley's 2 daughters and son remained under the care of Tom and live in Indiana. And Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joel, received the legal right to see their grandchildren. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Robert Denton. Bristol is a city in Sullivan County, Tennessee, United States. The surrounding landscape is dominated by hills and forests. Among the trees are scattered homes, many of which sit on secluded plots of land, slightly removed from the roads below. At approximately 5:45 p.m. on August 29, 2015, a local homeowner, who worked the night shift and was asleep at the time, was awakened by the sound of gunfire. He recounted stepping out onto his porch, looking around, and then heading back inside. He initially thought everything was normal since there was a hunting site nearby. However, he found it strange that this time the gunfire was rapid and stopped abruptly. Another local resident was in his backyard when the shooting began. He said he heard 10 to 12 shots followed by shouting, with the entire incident lasting less than a minute. After the sound of gunfire stopped, he saw a man running down the driveway of a neighboring house, where the driveway met the main road. The trees cleared, making the scene visible. The man attempted to get into a car to escape, but his pursuer was close behind. A few more shots rang out before the car sped off down the road that evening. 19-year-old Robert Denton called 911 after being attacked in his left arm, despite his injury. He managed to drive to a neighbor's house to contact emergency services. Robert reported that his grandmother, mother, and stepfather had been attacked within 5 minutes. Police arrived and began searching for the shooter soon. The narrow rural road was filled with ambulances. A medical helicopter landed in a field near the scene to take the surviving victims to Johnson City Medical Center. Inside the home, officers found 2 women dead: Lena Rose, 57, and her daughter, Toshia Milhorn, 39. Toshia's husband, James Milhorn, was found unconscious on the porch with severe injuries. He was taken to hospital but later died at the time of the shooting. 6 children were in the house. 5 were siblings, and the 6th was a visiting friend. A 7-year-old girl sustained non-life-threatening injuries, and none of the other children were harmed. Toshia and James had been married for about 4 years. Both also had children from previous marriages. James worked as a paramedic and firefighter for several agencies. He enjoyed restoring old cars and doing mechanical work in his free time. Toshia and James were remembered as loving, funny, and cherished by their family, friends. Those who knew them were left shocked and confused as to why anyone would want to harm them. The property where this tragedy occurred belonged to Toshia's parents, Curtis and Lena Rose, who had been married for 40 years. Toshia and her husband had moved in temporarily, intending to stay for just a few months while completing work on their trailer at the crime scene. Curtis said that, after he found out relatives were attacked, Robert had already run out of the house and was fleeing down the driveway, believing his grandson was responsible for the murders. Curtis chased after Robert while running. Curtis called emergency services and caught up with Robert at the end of the driveway. He fired one attack that hit Robert's car window and another that struck Robert in the arm, despite being wounded. Robert managed to flee in his car when the police arrived. Curtis directed them toward Robert, but by then, Robert had already disappeared behind the house's back door. Near the laundry room leading to the kitchen, a rifle and a camouflage jacket were found on the ground, which was identified as the murder weapon. 7 shell casings were recovered at the scene, matching the ammunition Robert had with him when emergency responders transported him to the hospital. Investigators determined that Robert had purchased this weapon at a military surplus store. A few weeks prior to the incident, a manhunt was launched for Robert. He then was arrested and charged with 6 counts, 3 for first-degree murder and 3 additional charges, 2 for aggravated assault and 1 for reckless endangerment. In February 2016, Robert pleaded not guilty after considering all factors, including his age at the time of the crime. The death penalty was removed. If he were to be convicted of the murders, Robert was held on $1 million bail. No charges were filed against Curtis, as law enforcement concluded that his account was consistent with the physical evidence. Curtis's version of events was accepted by law enforcement and became the foundation of their understanding of the massacre. Robert Denton, commonly known as Seth, was primarily raised by his grandparents. His mother, Toshia, reportedly struggled with mental health issues, including bipolar disorder. And Robert himself may have faced similar challenges. He briefly joined the military, but was later discharged and returned to live with his grandparents for a time. as a young adult. Robert sought independence and moved into a local apartment with a roommate shortly before the murders. Robert lost his job at a fast food restaurant. He had no criminal history or known violent tendencies, according to relatives and friends. However, Robert deeply resented his mother after interviewing those close to him. Authorities believe they were able to piece together the events leading up to the tragedy. Robert reportedly drove to his grandparents' house, parking at the bottom of a steep dirt driveway at approximately 1:45 p.m. He exited the car, put on a camouflage jacket, retrieved a semi-automatic rifle, and walked up the driveway past an above-ground pool before entering the house through the back door. Once inside, he swiftly attacks all 3 victims within seconds. Police were unable to determine the exact order in which the victims were attacked. After the attacks, Robert went outside, removed the camouflage jacket, and left it next to the weapon. He then crossed the property to his grandfather's trailer, where his grandfather was working, and knocked on the window. Robert is said to have called his grandfather out, apparently to urge him to call 911. Detectives believe Robert intentionally avoided involving children or his grandfather in the attack. They suspect his primary target was Toshia, while Lena and James were likely killed because they were present and witnesses to the murder. In late 2016, during jury selection at the Sullivan County Courthouse, Robert unexpectedly disrupted the proceedings. After several hours, the judge announced a brief recess when the trial resumed. Robert had already even threatened to dismiss his attorneys. Robert's defense team presented an alternative version of events. They accused his grandfather, Curtis Rose, of committing the murders and argued that investigators had made critical mistakes, particularly by ignoring evidence pointing to Curtis as the shooter rather than Robert. They pointed out that on the day of the incident, police allegedly asked no further questions about Curtis's involvement. Deputies from the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office who spoke with Curtis at the scene similarly avoided pressing him with follow-up questions. Besides, Robert's roommate testified for the prosecution to help establish a motive. He explained to the jury that Robert had expressed deep hatred for his mother over the years. Robert had frequently threatened to kill her, though family and friends who heard these threats dismissed them as immature outbursts rather than genuine intent. They never believed he would act on them. Another friend of Seth's also testified that a few months before the murders, he and Robert visited a military surplus store. At the store, Robert purchased 2 firearms. The store owner later confirmed the firearm purchase and verified the serial numbers. The defense argued that the strongest piece of evidence in the prosecution's case was the testimony of Curtis Rose, who had previously admitted to attacking Robert. Curtis once again recounted the events of that day. He explained that Robert had knocked on the side of the trailer to get his attention. Curtis then glanced into the room and, in a rush, ran into the house. Once inside, Curtis saw his daughter slumped unnaturally in a dining chair, covered in blood. Realizing she was dead, he desperately searched the entire house for his wife, Lena. Eventually, Curtis returned to the living room after checking the bedroom. At this point, Curtis noticed his son-in-law, James, lying on the front porch and making noises that caught his attention. He then went into the kitchen, where he found his wife dead, sitting between the table and the refrigerator. After discovering her body, Curtis returned to the bedroom to retrieve a gun. He then got into his van and drove down to the lower part of the driveway. He admitted that, at this time, he intended to kill Robert. Robert later testified. Providing his account of the events, he explained that, on that Saturday evening, he had called his aunt to ask where his mother was living because he wanted to visit his grandfather. with whom he shared a close bond. Robert and his grandfather occasionally went to the shooting range together, so he packed 2 weapons and a large amount of ammunition into his car. His aunt assured him that his mother wasn't living at his grandfather's house, but in a trailer elsewhere. This reassured Robert, as he wanted to avoid any interaction with his mother. Knowing it would lead to an argument, confident he wouldn't encounter Toshia, Robert drove to his grandfather's house. Robert parked at the end of the driveway and carried his weapon. Intending to show it to his grandfather, they briefly discussed ammunition. And during their conversation, Robert handed the weapon to his grandfather. According to Robert, his grandfather then walked into the house with the weapon, and Robert followed. Expecting that they might check for compatible ammunition, Robert recounted that when he entered the house behind his grandfather, the latter immediately began to attack with the weapon. Robert claimed that. From his position behind Curtis, he saw his mother sitting at the table and witnessed his grandfather kill her. His grandfather suddenly snapped, prompting him to panic and flee the house. Fearing for his life, however, the defense provided no clear motive as to why Curtis would have committed the murders. The trial lasted 8 days and included nearly 200 pieces of evidence. Both Curtis's shoes and Robert's shoes were covered in blood. The testimonies of Curtis and Robert contradicted each other, however. The jury confirmed that there was a lie in the testimony, according to Robert's friend and the arms dealer. The rifle used in the murder belonged to Robert. In fact, he had brought it to the Curtis house, and Robert still had bullets when fled. The jury deliberated for 2 full days on the first day. The jurors grew so tired after 5 hours of reviewing evidence that they requested to pause for the night, when they resumed the next day. They unanimously agreed on all 6 charges in the indictment. The jury found Robert Denton guilty of first-degree murder. The jury recommended a life sentence for Robert. With no possibility of parole for at least 51 years, Robert continues to claim his innocence. He is currently serving his sentence at the Turney Center Industrial Complex in Tennessee, the Millhorn. Children are still being cared for by family members. Hello, everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Samantha Fraser. Samantha Fraser was born on July 22, 1980 in Australia, to Janine and Trevor Fraser. She was cheerful, intelligent, and active. She received an award for outstanding academic achievement in high school and later served as the captain of the cheerleading team at university. Where she earned a degree in psychology, Samantha first met Adrian Basham in 2005 after dating for a while. They got married in 2007. They moved to a coastal town east of Melbourne, where Samantha's parents lived. She worked as a psychologist at a local medical center. Adrian was employed for a mining project on Barrow Island, located off the coast of Western Australia. Each time he returned home from his work rotation, he insisted that the house be perfectly organized. His expectations were extreme. For instance, all the cans in the pantry had to be arranged so that their labels were facing outward. If this standard was not met, it could lead to serious arguments. Despite the strain in their relationship and Adrian's frequent absences, Samantha's patience and good nature helped them navigate their challenges and maintain their life together. They eventually had 3 children. With her professional skills, kindness, and ability to connect with others, Samantha became a cherished member of the community. However, many were unaware of the struggles she faced in her personal life. Their relationship was plagued by abuse and controlling behavior. In 2014, Samantha was a victim of violence at the hands of Adrian, and this occurred again in 2016. This time, she chose to speak out and reported his actions. By then, Samantha lived in fear of Adrian, believing he was tracking her movements through his phone. He seemed to know everything she did, although she had filed a police report about his interference in her life. She worried it wouldn't stop him from hurting her again after years of a controlling and fearful marriage. Samantha and Adrian finalized their separation in April 2017. Initially, Samantha moved back in with her parents, but later, she returned to the house she had shared with Adrian and their children. Meanwhile, Adrian moved in with his father in Painesville, east of Phillip Island, and tried to make Samantha's life difficult by causing financial problems. He threatened to take away her home, savings, and other valuable possessions. Things escalated when Adrian warned Samantha that violent criminals could easily break into her home. Concerned for her safety as Adrian's behavior became more erratic, Samantha installed surveillance cameras, changed the locks, and took additional steps to secure her home. Peter Matthews, a friend of Samantha and Adrian, learned from Adrian about his plans regarding Samantha. Adrian suggested that he would make Samantha suffer in various ways, believing that if he couldn't have her, then no one else can have her. By 2018, Samantha began to feel more confident. She began dating Wayne Foster, and their relationship developed rapidly. For the first time in a long while, she felt she could trust someone and relax. On the eve of her birthday, Samantha shared with her friends that she hoped she was entering a new phase of her life. However, someone close to her mentioned seeing Adrian on Phillip Island, where she lived. This news shocked her and revived old fears. She was determined to handle it better this time, reminding herself to be cautious and not let fear take over. She realized Adrian had already consumed too much of her time and energy, and she wanted to reclaim her life from him. However, she still had unresolved issues with him. In the meantime, Samantha was scheduled to testify against Adrian in a court case involving violence, and just the thought of it filled her with anxiety about how the confrontation would unfold. On Sunday, July 22, 2018, Samantha celebrated her 38th birthday joyfully and surrounded by friends. They baked a cake together, and everyone noticed how relaxed and optimistic Samantha was about her future. The following day, she drove the children to school around 11 a.m. Adrian sneaked into her house and waited for her while she had coffee with her friend Leah Matthews. After their coffee, they hugged goodbye, and Leah promised to call her later. 2 hours later, Samantha returned home and parked in the garage before she could even get out of the car. She was shocked to see Adrian when she was still sitting in the driver's seat, feeling frightened. Samantha, who weighed only 57 kg and was much smaller than Adrian, bravely tried to defend herself. Unfortunately, Adrian overpowered her, brutally beat her, and then hanged her in the garage. It is believed that he cleaned the blood from her hair and face, removed her white shirt, and fled the scene. Surveillance cameras captured him running out of the house at 2 p.m. with the hood of his jacket pulled over part of his face. On that day, her children could not be picked up by her. At 4 p.m., the principal of the elementary school called the police to report that the children's mother, Samantha, had not arrived to pick them up. To ensure everything was okay, the police went to Samantha's house. After checking the area and finding nothing unusual, they broke in by breaking the garage door. Inside, they found Samantha. She was hanging in the garage, bloodied and bruised, with a rope tied in a complex knot around her neck. She wore a black t-shirt and pants, and her feet were bare. There were clear signs of violence. Her right cheek and the area around her eye was swollen. Her hair was wet and fell over her face, and there was a reddish-purple mark above her right eye. An overturned step stool lay nearby among various unusual items. The police contacted the Criminal Investigations Department and secured the area to protect the crime scene. While they waited for the investigative team to arrive, the police noted blood above and below the knot on the rope, as well as blood beneath Samantha's feet, which were nearly touching the ground. No suicide note was found. Given these details, the arriving investigators classified the case as a homicide. After examining the scene, detectives searched Samantha's Land Cruiser and discovered her wallet, diary, and mobile phone inside. Notably, her purse contained $9.5 in cash, which had no clear explanation. The investigation team decided to request footage from surveillance cameras. They also investigated the homicide by examining the utensils in Samantha's kitchen, found 2 glasses on the table and traces of blood near the dishwasher in the garage. They also looked for fingerprints on the walls and shoe prints on the floor. On that same Monday, James, Adrian's father, noticed that his son returned home late on his motorcycle. Adrian parked the motorcycle in the garage, and James was alarmed to see him riding at a dangerous speed. He also noticed a scar or scratch on Adrian's nose. When James asked about it, Adrian explained that he must have gotten it from a tree branch during his ride. Adrian looked tired, making James think it was from the long journey. Adrian mentioned that he had been in a bad mood all day. Later, Adrian used baby wipes to wipe off what he described as just insects that had clung to the motorcycle during the ride. Samantha's relatives, still reeling from her tragic death, expressed deep confusion to the authorities about the apparent motive. They emphasized how dedicated Samantha was to her children, insisting that it was unimaginable for her to have abandoned them or taken her own life. The local community mourned the tragedy, displaying white ribbons on mailboxes and shop windows throughout the town. On the morning of Tuesday, July 24, after assembling a board of images featuring potential suspects, a tactical intelligence officer presented evidence linking 12 items to Adrian. Soon after, James received an unexpected call from the police inquiring about his son. A few hours later, when James heard the news about Samantha, he urged Adrian to cooperate with the authorities. When the police came to their home, Adrian followed his father's advice and listened in silence. However, a fresh scratch on his nose hinted at something more. Lacking sufficient evidence against him, the officers left, hoping the investigation would progress. On July 26, 2018, the police arrived at James's home with a search warrant for a motorcycle. During the forensic examination, they found several bloodstains, including one on the fuel tank. Forensic experts also discovered DNA samples on the handle and under Samantha's nails. They determined that the severe head injuries Samantha sustained resulted in a traumatic brain injury. The incident received national media attention, and a Facebook fundraising page created to support Samantha's children. At the time, the 3 children were being cared for by Samantha's parents, who were on vacation in the United States. Upon hearing about the tragedy, the grandparents returned to care for their grandchildren. Meanwhile, the investigation continued, and the examination supported claims that Samantha could not have taken her own life, as she would not have left her children alone. The DNA analysis results provided undeniable evidence that led to Adrian's arrest and charge for Samantha's murder. On Friday, August 10, 2018, family and friends gathered to honor Samantha, along with the close-knit community of Phillip Island, who came to say goodbye to their beloved local psychologist. Around 400 people filled the hall, with some guests carrying bouquets of flowers. The wait for the trial was particularly lengthy, during which Samantha's eldest daughter struggled with anxiety, guilt, and even thoughts of self-harm. Her younger siblings experienced similar feelings, but all family members and close friends offered strong support to the children. When it was announced that the trial would take place in 2022, Samantha's eldest daughter spent 4 long months preparing what she wanted to say to Adrian. The trial began in the early months of 2022 at the Supreme Court of Victoria. During the proceedings, she bravely took the stand and looked her father in the eyes as she told him that his actions had not broken her. In fact, her presence was enough to show this. As she turned to the court to ensure that her mother would receive justice, she explained to her father that her actions were motivated by her love for her family, friends, and herself. As she was still grappling with the trauma of her mother's murder and the deep emptiness it left in her life, Samantha's second daughter, who was 9 years old, testified in court that her father had taken away the best part of her heart. Additionally, Janine spoke about her youngest grandchild in court, revealing that he was so terrified of his father that he built a fortress in his bed on court days. to shield himself from the monster, despite the pain of his children. Adrian attempted to alleviate his own guilt over his horrific crime. Adrian's defense team acknowledged that he had attacked Samantha and caused her injury, but insisted that he did not kill her. They argued that Adrian acted impulsively and without intent when he arrived at Samantha's house around noon, claiming his original purpose was not violent. However, the defense did not provide any evidence to support their case. In contrast, the prosecutors contended that Adrian had attacked Samantha, resulting in her death, and then tried to conceal his crime by hanging her on the garage gates. Adrian attempted to convince the jury that another person had assaulted Samantha and that she took her own life as a result. After weeks of deliberation, the jury found Adrian guilty of intentional murder. The judge stated that Adrian acted out of selfishness, killing his ex-wife to avoid facing court proceedings related to domestic violence incidents in 2014 and 2016. In late February 2023, Adrian Basham was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 30 years to serve before he can be considered for parole. When the verdict was announced, Samantha's family applauded, while Samantha's eldest daughter watched her father's reaction to his sentence. In subsequent statements, she said that the damage inflicted by Adrian was incomparable to anything else. As they left the court, Adrian briefly stopped to look at his children outside the courthouse. Trevor, the primary guardian for his grandchildren, declared that justice had prevailed. Samantha's friends were also present, viewing the verdict as a significant milestone in similar cases. To further this cause, they established a fund dedicated to combating domestic violence. Lydia, a friend who had shared hugs with Samantha before her death, noted that starting the fund was the only truly positive outcome amidst this tragedy.
Amy Beth Lord was born on December 21, 1988, in Springfield, Massachusetts. Her family moved to Wilbraham shortly after her birth, where she grew up with her two close sisters, Kimberly and Carly. The siblings shared a strong bond and enjoyed a loving family environment. After graduating high school in 2007, Amy pursued higher education at Bentley University, focusing on humanities, business, and marketing. Thanks to her remarkable intellect, she excelled academically and earned her bachelor's degree in 2011, becoming a certified marketer. Following her studies, Amy aimed to kickstart her career, relocating to Boston, Massachusetts. There, she quickly found a position as an internet marketing specialist and worked for 2 years. Life was going well. She made close friends and was in a relationship with Mike Cassell, with whom she was planning to start a family. On July 23, 2013, at 5:38 a.m., 24-year-old Amy was in the lobby of her apartment building. She had woken up early to meet her friend and co-worker, Christina Kelleher, for a gym session at 6 a.m. However, when Amy didn't arrive, Christina waited at the bus stop for a while before deciding to go to the gym alone, assuming her friend had overslept and didn't want to wake her. Although Amy was usually very punctual, Christina wasn't too concerned and expected to see her at work later, as their desks were next to each other. After finishing her workout, Christina was surprised to find that Amy was still not at the office. Feeling alarmed, she reached out to Mike, Amy's boyfriend, to check if he knew where she was. He had no idea and mentioned that he assumed Amy had gone to the gym. Over several hours, Mike and Christina tried repeatedly to reach Amy, but they were unsuccessful. At 11:30 a.m., Christina decided to contact the office manager. They had already called all of Amy's friends and acquaintances, but no one knew her whereabouts. Consequently, the management opted to report her missing to the police. After taking the report, the officers contacted Amy's parents, who had also not seen her. They agreed to meet with her relatives at her apartment in South Boston to investigate further, which happened around 2 p.m. Detectives searched the apartment for any evidence of a struggle, robbery, or other criminal activity, but found nothing out of order. Everything appeared to be in its place, and the locks were secure. It seemed that Amy had simply vanished. Her family emphasized that she led a happy and organized life. She had no plans for sudden trips and wouldn't have run away without informing anyone. They believed something must have happened to her. A contact lens belonging to Amy was discovered in the building's foyer, and there were also marks on the nearby wall that suggested a possible confrontation. To gather more information about Amy, police interviewed her parents in detail. They revealed that Amy was driving a black Jeep Cherokee SUV. Shortly after, an officer recalled that at 8:37 a.m. in southern Boston, a fire had been reported. At that location, they found an SUV fully engulfed in flames. The fire department extinguished the fire and then towed the vehicle for further investigation. The car's description matched Amy's SUV. She had not yet been officially reported missing at that time. Although the license plates were completely burned away, the lab was able to identify the chassis number of the burned vehicle, confirming that it belonged to Amy Lord. Detectives returned to the station and started verifying Amy's bank transaction data. They discovered that her bank cards had been used to withdraw money 5 times that morning. Beginning at 6 a.m., the total amount withdrawn was approximately $1,000, and the withdrawals were made from different ATMs. This raised suspicions because it was unusual to withdraw money repeatedly from various locations in the city. The first transaction took place near her apartment. When the police arrived, they noticed a surveillance camera beside the ATM. They reviewed the footage, hoping to spot Amy in the morning recordings and gain insights into what happened. The process of reviewing the footage took considerable time, and officers examined recordings from all the ATMs where Amy's card had been used. They also found additional surveillance equipment on nearby buildings. All this evidence was gathered to piece together a clear timeline of events from that morning. While police were working with banks to collect footage, they received a call around 4 p.m. from a cyclist who had found a body at the Stony Brook Reservation in Hyde Park. The body was that of a young woman. Upon arrival, detectives discovered the victim was naked and had suffered over 40 stab wounds, primarily to her neck, face, and chest. There were also hand marks on her throat, suggesting she had been strangled. Her body was dumped in a secluded area covered with foxes, far from the city, but the killer did not attempt to conceal it. No identification was found. However, based on police photographs, they believed the victim was Amy Lord. Once her identity was confirmed, the missing person case transitioned into a murder investigation. The analysis of the CCTV recordings from the ATMs has been completed. The first sighting of Amy was at 6:35 a.m. She appeared alone at the ATM in her workout clothes and appeared uninjured. She used her ATM card and left. At 6:47 a.m., she arrived at another ATM just a few blocks away. This time, the camera captured her car from the outside. Amy was again unharmed and wearing sportswear. She withdrew cash by herself. However, her behavior was unusual. The police observed that, while the car was parked outside the bank, she was sitting in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. About 7 minutes later, she appeared in another video, this time with visible facial injuries, including a broken nose and several bruises, indicating she had been attacked. It seemed she had been kidnapped, yet she did not attempt to escape. Amy withdrew cash again and returned to the car, remaining in the passenger seat. Detectives tracked the car's movements throughout the city and obtained more recordings in an effort to identify the driver. The first shot showing Amy in the passenger seat and the driver behind the wheel was captured at 6:10 a.m. This helped them establish a timeline of events, but they still could not identify the driver's face. While reviewing the footage, the police noticed that the driver was hiding his face, possibly with a t-shirt or a headband. He wore a cap, and in one clip, when he adjusted it, it showed that he had a clean-shaven head. Detectives needed to find the exact moment Amy was abducted, so they continued gathering information from CCTV cameras. This effort led them to capture the moment Amy left her apartment. As soon as she opened the door, she was attacked by an unknown man who had been waiting outside. Pacing back and forth, he forced her inside and they stayed behind the closed door for about 15 minutes. At 5:52 a.m., both of them came out and walked toward Amy's car. This suggests that the first cash withdrawal happened while she was being threatened. This information helped the police piece together the sequence of events. As soon as she left her apartment, preparing for a workout before heading to work, she was kidnapped. The attacker likely persuaded her that if she gave him enough money, he would let her go. As a result, Amy did not resist and complied with his demands. After withdrawing the required amount from her card, she was taken out of town and attacked with a knife. Following the murder, her body was left in a wooded area and her car was set on fire. The police were unable to obtain a clear image of the suspect's face. Investigators questioned Amy's relatives to check if anyone might have wanted to harm her, but she had no known enemies. Her boyfriend had a strong alibi and was ruled out as a suspect. The attacker needed gasoline to set the car on fire. In the video footage from when the attack started, the attacker was not seen carrying anything that looked like fuel. Therefore, he must have bought it at a gas station. After the attack, he drove 10 kilometers to a country park to dispose of the body before returning. Detectives reviewed all intersections with cameras where the perpetrator might have been seen. The investigation was challenging because the victim drove a common car. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of black SUVs in the city, but her relatives pointed out a distinctive clue, a cloverleaf-shaped sticker on the rear window. This made it easier to track her car in traffic and locate the gas station where the attacker had stopped. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that station wasn't working. Detectives noticed a liquor store across the street that had a front camera. They obtained some footage, but it was too distant to clearly see the criminal's face. At around 8 a.m., the suspect arrived at a gas station without Amy. The car was recognizable because of a cloverleaf-shaped sticker. Although the driver's face was not seen, he waved at someone and approached another person. They exchanged a few words, shook hands, and then the suspect's companion left. Fortunately, this person came closer to the liquor store's CCTV camera, allowing him to be identified. The police located him, had a conversation, and he revealed that he met his friend, 28-year-old Edwin Alamany, near the gas station. At 8 a.m., Edwin was in a black SUV that had not been seen before. He previously worked as a waiter's assistant and was currently unemployed. Early in the morning, on July 23, 2013, around 4:23, another resident of South Boston, Alexandra Cruz, was attacked just before Amy was kidnapped. Alexandra was walking to her job at Dunkin' Donuts when a stranger assaulted her in the parking lot, hitting her in the jaw and causing her to briefly lose consciousness. The attacker then began to strangle her, but suddenly stopped, claiming he had made a mistake and was looking for someone else. He threatened to kill her if she screamed. He took her valuables and turned away for a moment, giving her the chance to escape. Despite his threat that she would be killed if she reported him, Alexandra did not keep quiet. Once she arrived at work, she called the police. About an hour later, an officer came to take her statement, and they created a composite sketch of the assailant. During the investigation at Amy's apartment, the police received another urgent call. Around midnight in South Boston, a girl was stabbed. Detectives quickly recognized that this crime occurred near Amy Lord's apartment. This led them to believe they were dealing with a serial attacker, as there had already been 3 similar incidents involving girls. The investigation needed to continue, as the officers received a new call. 21-year-old Kaylee Ballantyne was attacked shortly after midnight. She was the only daughter in her family, raised alongside 2 older brothers, which may have contributed to her ability to defend herself. Her parents described her as a fighter from a young age. All the children in the family were athletic, but despite her delicate appearance, Kaylee displayed remarkable strength, sometimes even outdoing her brothers. In 2003, when she was just 11, she faced a serious incident when a basketball backboard fell on her head, leaving her in a coma for a month. Fortunately, she survived, recovered fully, and even resumed playing hockey. When the police spoke with the victim of the latest attack, Kaylee was injured, but still alive and able to recount her night. She had been working and was heading home around midnight. With her headphones on, she didn't notice any danger right away. As she approached her apartment, she noticed a suspicious-looking man on the opposite side of the street. He was large and appeared to be watching her. Then, he crossed over to her side, stopped, and stared at her for about 5 seconds. This made her feel uneasy, so Kaylee hurried her steps. She got to her apartment and went to enter the code to get in. Initially, she entered it wrong, but got it right on the second try. When Kaylee opened the door, the man was right behind her. He put his hand on her left shoulder and pushed her through the door, his right hand holding a knife to her head. Kaylee fell to the floor, and the attacker pushed down on her, sitting on top of her. She pleaded for her life, asking him to take anything he wanted, but he began to stab her without saying a word. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Kaylee crossed her left arm over her chest and started to fight back with her right hand. She also kicked at him. During the struggle, she successfully knocked the attacker's hand away, causing him to accidentally hurt himself and loosen his grip. Sports weren't merely a hobby for Kaylee, she was a professional athlete, strong and resilient, which helped her find the strength to fight back. This moment gave her the opportunity to save her life. After her attacker fell backwards and Simple walked away. As he walked away, Kaylee slammed the door behind him so he couldn't come back. She remembered that she didn't know how many times she had been stabbed and that she didn't really feel any pain when it happened. She tried to stand up, but she collapsed and her chest tightened. She wondered if it was her adrenaline, if she was dying, and knew she needed to get into her apartment. Kaylee said that for some reason, her apartment key was in her pocket, which made it much easier, so she crawled to the apartment door, unlocked it, and went inside. Once inside, she crawled to her first roommate's room and told her that she had just been stabbed and that she needed her to get towels, tissues, or anything to stitch up the wound and then call 911. She insisted on calling her loved ones, worried that she might not make it through the attack. Her friends stayed calm and encouraged her to call emergency services first. Meanwhile, the neighbor took a video of everything Kaylee said. Remarkably, she managed to remain calm, even though she had sustained serious injuries: 2 stab wounds to her face and 2 to her neck. In total, the attacker had stabbed her 9 times, with 1 wound puncturing her left lung and another coming dangerously close to her heart. The trial of Edwin Alemany started in 2015 and lasted for 14 days. The key witness for the prosecution was Kaylee, the survivor. During her testimony, she displayed such inner strength that Edwin could not even look her in the eye. Alexander Cruz, the first victim, also testified against him. Edwin's defense attorney attempted to downplay his violent behavior, arguing that Edwin had tried to end his own life by cutting his wrists, which resulted in scratches on his neck and arms. Ultimately, Edwin was found guilty of first-degree murder for Amy's death, armed robbery, aggravated assault with a weapon, and attempted murder of Kaylee Ballantyne and Alexander Cruz. He never accepted responsibility or showed any regret for his actions. On June 9, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Amy and received an additional 35 years for the attacks on Kaylee and Alexander. When Kaylee gave her final statement, she shared her challenges in trying to live a normal life. Her heartfelt words brought many people in the courtroom to tears. Amy's parents gave Kaylee their late daughter's necklace as a token of gratitude for her testimony, which helped convict a dangerous criminal. However, Edwin, the criminal, never showed any remorse. In October 2020, he approached a federal judge to complain that his lawyers had been ineffective by opting for an insanity defense and admitting his guilt without his consent, despite him claiming he was innocent. In 2021, the state Supreme Court upheld his conviction. Edwin then hired a new lawyer and tried to formulate a different strategy to gain immediate release by pointing out the mistakes made by his previous attorney and the prosecution. However, these attempts were unsuccessful. After Kaylee recovered from her injuries, she returned to school and graduated from university. She lived in Boston until Edwin's case was resolved. After that, she decided to move to California to find peace away from big cities, hoping to cope with her post-traumatic stress disorder. Gradually, she healed from her psychological trauma and even began to dream again, which felt like a significant achievement. During this period, she felt intense anger towards Edwin for taking Amy's life and nearly ending hers too. Kaylee struggled to understand what could drive someone to such senseless cruelty. Over time, however, she began to feel pity for Edwin, recognizing the flaws in his character that led to his actions. Eventually, she wrote him a letter of forgiveness, but never sent it. It remained in her desk for 2 years. Then Kaylee tried to contact Edwin's lawyer, but received no response. Later, during a sermon about forgiveness at her church, she was reminded of the man who nearly took her life. Coincidentally, the pastor was visiting the prison where Edwin was held, so Kaylee asked him to deliver her letter. 2 weeks later, she received a response. In his letter, Edwin discussed his hard childhood. He was born in Puerto Rico and moved to the United States without speaking English. He shared the difficulties he encountered both at work and in his personal life, including experiences of bullying during his childhood. These challenges resulted in behavioral issues that ultimately led to him being in juvenile prison for a significant part of his youth. Initially, Kaylee felt compassion for him after reading the letter, but a few weeks later, she discovered that he was trying to appeal his case, claiming that his tough upbringing had broken him. This revelation made her question his sincerity, as she suspected he was trying to gain her sympathy. As a result, she decided not to reply to him. In the end, his appeal was denied, and he remains in prison. Kaylee hopes he is attending school and working on self-improvement. She believes he didn't ruin her life. Instead, he improved it. Kaylee has decided to turn her circumstances into something positive and feels happier than ever. Even though she faces daily anxiety and various challenges, she continues attending therapy and strives to maintain a positive outlook. After spending some time in California, she returned to Maine, where she currently resides. As a public speaker, she shares her story to inspire and support others who have experienced trauma. About a year ago, she stepped back from public speaking and is now seeking new ways to share her message. Kaylee feels passionate about her story because it has the potential to connect with others and create positive change in their lives. Currently, she works in marketing, is in a loving relationship, and has recently purchased her first home. On August 16, 2023, a young woman was admitted to the Mayo Clinic, one of the top medical centers in the world, in critical condition. Her internal organs were failing quickly. She was severely dehydrated, and her body temperature was unstable. Despite the emergency treatments, doctors were having a hard time stabilizing her because they could not identify the cause of her sudden decline. Betty Bowman, a successful pharmacist known for her commitment to health and wellness, was now fighting for her life. Her colleagues were stunned. Just the day before, she had been vibrant and energetic. Now medical professionals were urgently trying to save her. One by one, possible diagnoses were eliminated. Lab tests did not yield clear results, and her condition kept deteriorating. What could have led to such a swift decline in the health of a young, otherwise healthy woman? As doctors sought answers, they started to understand that the cause was not a typical illness. Betty was born in 1991 in Kansas. She grew up in a hard-working family that valued honesty, perseverance, and care for one another. From a young age, she showed determination and a strong work ethic in all her endeavors. She performed well in school, particularly excelling in science, developed a deep passion for biology and chemistry. After high school, she enrolled in a pharmacy program at university, where she quickly became one of the top students. Unlike many of her classmates who focused on memorizing theories, Betty was truly interested in medical processes, chemical compounds, and how medications affect the human body. After graduation, she started her career working in a pharmacy before moving to a medical facility. There, she earned the respect of her co-workers and built a reputation as a dedicated, knowledgeable professional. Conor Bowman was born in 1993 in Kansas, but his upbringing was quite different from Betty's. He was self-centered and strategic, often manipulating others to achieve his goals. Unlike Betty, he did not value hard work and integrity. Instead, he aimed to gain the most benefit with the least effort. Academically, Conor was not exceptional in school, but his charisma and quick thinking helped him handle challenging situations smoothly. He had a talent for winning over important people and presenting himself positively, choosing a career in pharmaceuticals. He attended the same university as Betty. However, his interest in medicine was not aligned with that of his peers. While they wanted to help others, Conor approached pharmacology with a focus on influence and control over the human body. Later, he pursued further education in a medical program to open up more career opportunities, elevate his professional standing. Betty and Conor met while studying at university. Despite their differing personalities, they formed a relationship. Betty admired Conor for his intelligence and ambition, while Conor appreciated the advantages of being with her. They got married in May 2021. A few months later, Betty received a job offer from the prestigious Mayo Clinic, prompting them to move to Minnesota. For Betty, this was a significant career advancement, but for Conor, it meant living in the shadow of his successful wife. At that time, he was still in school, and all financial responsibilities fell on Betty. She paid for their living expenses, his education, and daily costs. Conor did not work and depended entirely on his wife's support, eventually growing comfortable with this dynamic. As time went on, Betty's focus shifted more towards her career. She made new friends and thrived professionally, while Conor began to feel insecure and sidelined. Although they seemed like a successful couple on the surface, tension was brewing beneath. Over time, Betty started to suspect that Conor had developed deeper feelings for someone else. When she discovered the truth, her suspicions were confirmed. It wasn't just a casual affair, but genuine affection. This revelation became the breaking point for Betty, leading her to decide on a divorce. To her, it made sense, but for Conor, it meant losing his comfortable lifestyle and financial stability. He realized that post-divorce, he would be starting from scratch with debts and no safety net. Divorce wasn't in his plans. He considered another option that promised both freedom and financial gain. On August 10, 2023, Betty Bowman was at her home in Rochester, Minnesota. She had invited a close friend over for the evening to relax, catch up, and take a break from work. It had been some time since they last met. Both were excited to spend time together. Conor was also home that evening, but he typically did not join these gatherings. He usually kept to himself, showed little interest in Betty's conversations with her friends, and preferred to focus on his own activities. That day, Conor was behaving unusually. Out of the blue, he offered to make smoothies, which surprised Betty. He had never shown interest in cooking or care for her meals before. Household chores always fell to her. This unexpected gesture felt out of character for him. Conor went into the kitchen, collected the ingredients, and began making the drinks. Betty's friend noticed his excitement and was slightly surprised, but didn't give it much thought. Betty also didn't question it, although suggested something was off about his behavior. A few minutes later, he came back with 2 glasses. When Betty took a sip, she quickly realized something was wrong. The drink had a bitter, slightly salty aftertaste that felt unusual. She frowned, perplexed by the strange flavor. Her friend, intrigued by the reaction, decided to give it a try too. The taste was indeed horrible, and the smoothie was ruined. However, no one considered what might have caused the bad flavor. They just set the glasses aside and moved on. Conor didn't offer any explanation. He didn't suggest making another batch, didn't explain the strange taste, and showed no interest in the fact that the drink was undrinkable. Betty quickly brushed off the incident, thinking he simply made a bad smoothie. However, it wasn't an accident. It was actually the first attempt, which failed because she hadn't finished the drink. Conor recognized his error and realized that next time he needed to ensure it turned out better. On August 14, 2023, everything appeared normal at the Bowman home. Betty returned late from a long day at work, feeling exhausted after spending hours in the lab, discussing new pharmaceutical research with her colleagues. She just wanted to relax, have a quick dinner, and get some rest. Connor recognized this was a crucial moment for him. His first attempt a few days earlier had failed because the taste was too evident. He had learned from his mistakes and was determined to be more careful this time. Throughout the day, he researched how the added substance would affect the body and calculated the precise amount needed to induce a severe reaction without immediate effects. He waited for the perfect moment when Betty was tired and less likely to notice anything unusual. When she entered the kitchen, he casually offered her a smoothie. He acted relaxed to avoid arousing her suspicion. Betty accepted the glass, took a few sips, and finished the smoothie calmly. This time, the taste seemed perfectly normal. Connor had thoughtfully adjusted the ingredients to hide any unusual flavors. That evening, Betty started to feel unwell. She felt a bit tired and had a mild headache. Thinking it wasn't serious, she didn't think much of it. However, by the morning of August 15th, her condition had deteriorated. She woke up with a severe headache, nausea, and extreme exhaustion. Shortly after, she began to have serious stomach problems. Her body was losing fluids quickly, and even a small sip of water made her feel sick again. By midday, Betty's condition had worsened. She struggled to get out of bed, feeling as if her body was heavy. Her temperature was gow, and her muscles hurt. By evening, her weakness intensified to the point where walking to the bathroom became difficult. She was very dehydrated, and she kept feeling sick. Every time she tried to eat, she felt even worse. On August 16th, she recognized that she could no longer take care of herself. She felt so weak that even a simple phone call was tiring. She contacted the Mayo Clinic to explain her symptoms. Later that day, Betty Bowman was admitted to the hospital in critical condition. She was dangerously dehydrated. Her blood pressure was unstable, and she had a high temperature. Doctors quickly initiated a thorough evaluation, but they could not determine the cause. Initial tests indicated severe complications affecting her internal organs. The most alarming finding was in her intestines, where scans showed areas of dead tissue. This meant that parts of her digestive tract were not getting enough oxygen and had started to die. Emergency surgery was performed to remove the damaged part of her body, but doctors were uncertain if the issue had spread further. After the surgery, she was placed in intensive care and connected to life support machines. Unfortunately, her condition worsened. Within hours, her kidneys began to fail, and she needed dialysis. The situation escalated when, on August 18th, her liver also showed signs of trouble. Tests revealed a significant increase in liver enzymes indicating toxic damage. The medical team was perplexed by Betty's condition. She was a young, healthy woman without any history of chronic illness. Why was her health deteriorating so rapidly? During this time, Connor Bowman showed unusual determination. He often told doctors that his wife had a rare genetic condition called hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, HLH. This was odd because HLH usually appears in early childhood, and Betty had never shown any symptoms of it. The doctors looked into her medical history and found no signs of the condition. Even more alarming, Connor was informing friends and family that Betty was dying from this disease, even though the medical team had not diagnosed her with it. On August 19th, Betty's health took a severe turn for the worse as she experienced multiple organ failure. Her heart, kidneys, and liver stopped functioning properly, and fluid built up in her lungs, making it hard for her to breathe. Despite the doctor's best efforts, the situation looked dire. On August 20th, 2023, at 2:50 p.m., Betty Bowman, 32, was declared dead. The medical team could not determine the exact cause of her death. However, her husband's lack of questions and his behavior raised some concerns. He did not seem to seek answers, inquire about possible causes, or request further examination. Instead, he appeared to act as if he already anticipated the outcome. After Betty's death, doctors recommended an autopsy because Betty's unexpected decline was puzzling, and standard protocols call for a post-mortem examination. However, Connor firmly opposed this. He asserted that Betty had always expressed a desire not to have her body used for medical research. This declaration surprised the staff at the Mayo Clinic, as it is common for families to seek answers when someone who seemed healthy dies suddenly. Most families typically request additional tests and clarifications. In contrast, Connor was resolute in insisting that no autopsy be conducted and that there should be no further investigation. Law enforcement officers involved in the case noted that his behavior was suspicious. He not only refused an autopsy, but also rushed to make funeral arrangements. Just hours after Betty's death, he submitted the cremation paperwork and wanted it done quickly. However, doctors stepped in because they were not convinced her death was from natural causes. They decided to pause the cremation to conduct further investigations. The next day, Connor began writing an obituary, which revealed another strange aspect of the case. He did not mention Betty's mother and sister, the two people closest to her. Instead, he only referenced himself and their dog. This made it seem like he was intentionally downplaying Betty's family ties, almost trying to erase parts of her life. Around this time, Connor invited an acquaintance over for drinks. The acquaintance later noted that they had expected to find a grieving husband in distress. However, when they arrived at the house, they saw Connor looking relaxed and even cheerful. During their conversation, he showed no signs of sadness, didn't mention what had happened, and seemed unfazed for someone who had just lost his wife days earlier. Just days after the funeral, Connor started openly talking about the $500,000 life insurance payout he received after his wife's death. It seemed like he was satisfied with how things had turned out. Many people respected Betty both professionally and personally. Those close to her expected her husband to be deeply affected by her loss. However, he appeared relaxed. Some who overheard his discussions noted that he talked about the insurance money as if it had resolved his financial issues instead of representing the loss of his wife. Investigators became particularly interested in Connor's financial situation after discovering that he had been facing considerable debt while in school. He had accumulated substantial student loans that continued to increase. Unlike Betty, who had a stable and well-paying job, Connor was financially dependent. As he was still completing his medical training, his residence salary was insufficient to meet their expenses. As investigators examined his behavior following Betty's death, more troubling details came to light. Even before he received the insurance payout, he did not try to find other sources of income and showed no concern for his financial future. This raised questions. If Betty's death had truly been unexpected, shouldn't he have been eager to find answers? Wouldn't he have asked the doctors questions, sought explanations, or requested additional tests? Instead, he appeared to act as if he already knew what had happened, suggesting that any further inquiry would only complicate things for him. Detectives ultimately determined that Connor's financial difficulties could have been a significant motive for the crime. He had a strong incentive to benefit from his wife's death, as he stood to gain much more financially than he would have from a divorce. Friends and family of Betty were shocked that someone so close to her could plan such a cruel act for financial gain. Connor's behavior, his emotional detachment, and his financial problems suggested that Betty's death may not have been an accident. Investigators collected blood samples from Betty taken during her hospital stay. The tests revealed a startling finding. Her blood contained a dangerously high level of colchicine, a substance used in medical treatments that can be fatal in large amounts. Colchicine is not commonly linked to intentional poisoning, as it is hard to obtain without professional access. It is mainly used to treat gout, but its toxic effects can be very harmful if misused. The symptoms of an overdose aligned perfectly with Betty's condition, starting with nausea, stomach problems, and weakness, and progressing to organ failure and intestinal necrosis. After obtaining this information, investigators started to explore who might have access to the substance. Their investigation soon pointed to Connor Bowman. With a medical background, he possessed the knowledge to use colchicine effectively. Even more alarmingly, he had previously worked at a poison control center, studying how toxic compounds affect the human body. This finding was the first significant clue suggesting he could be linked to the incident. Detectives began interviewing Betty's friends and family. Her close friend, who was at Betty's house on August 10th, recounted a peculiar incident involving a smoothie. The friend noted that the drink tasted bitter and slightly salty. Initially, they both thought the smoothie had simply spoiled. She also remembered joking at the time that Connor might have tampered with the drink. They laughed off the remark then, but now it felt much more serious. This detail caught the investigators' attention, as it suggested that someone might have attempted to poison Betty even before she was hospitalized. If the first attempt had a low dose, it seemed reasonable to believe that Connor might have tried again, using a stronger concentration of the substance. Betty's family, including her mother and sister, revealed that in the weeks before her death, she had been seriously thinking about getting a divorce. They recalled her expressing unhappiness in her marriage and her intention to separate. All the evidence suggests that Betty's death might not have been a tragic accident, but instead a carefully planned crime. After confirming the presence of colchicine in Betty's system, investigators sought additional evidence. They secured permission to search Connor's workspace at the Mayo Clinic, where he was completing his medical residency. A review of his work computer uncovered troubling information. His browser history included searches like lethal dose of colchicine, how to hide traces of poison, can police track search history, and how to erase purchase records on Amazon. These searches were significant to the investigation, suggesting that Connor had researched fatal dosages beforehand and was actively looking for ways to conceal his actions. Investigators looking into Connor Bowman's online accounts found that he had bought substances not connected to his medical practice. These substances included colchicine and sodium nitrate, raising further alarm. Although sodium nitrate is often used in the chemical and food sectors, it can be toxic in higher doses. The investigators determined that Connor was experimenting with various compounds, trying to find a subtle method to harm his wife without attracting attention. The investigation also revealed that Connor was claiming to be a widower on the dating app Bumble even before his wife's death. A woman who met him on September 5th reported to investigators that she asked him if it was appropriate to flirt with someone else after his wife's passing. Connor said it was a good question and that he was open to dating again. He expressed that he knew what he wanted in life and believed that Betty would have wanted him to move on and be happy. The documents state that he told her his wife had died from listeria poisoning earlier in the summer. Additionally, another woman who met Bowman on August 29th, just 9 days after Betty's death, found it odd when he mentioned a significant life insurance payout he received, which he used to pay off his student loans. On October 20th, 2023, authorities issued an arrest warrant for Connor Bowman. By then, there was substantial evidence against him, including lab reports, his search history on his work computer, and his suspicious behavior after Betty's death. He was arrested in the early morning at his home in Rochester, Minnesota. Officers arrived with the warrant, and Bowman was taken into custody without putting up a fight. He remained calm and showed no aggression, but he also did not try to defend himself, which caught the attention of investigators. The court set Bowman's bail at $2 million, but he could not afford to pay it. After his arrest, his financial situation changed dramatically. His accounts were frozen and his assets were investigated. Without access to his funds, he stayed in custody while waiting for his trial. Meanwhile, investigators worked to collect more evidence to fully understand the crime. They looked into his communications, financial records, and relationships with colleagues and acquaintances to identify potential motives, find any additional incriminating information. The legal process was just starting, but it was already evident that Connor Bowman would face justice. After his arrest, Betty's family and friends called for the toughest punishment available. They were certain that her death was the result of a premeditated crime. They sought a life sentence, convinced that someone who could commit such a deliberate act should never be released. The prosecution was diligent in building a strong case, making sure the evidence was compelling and undeniable. Although the trial had not begun yet, the evidence clearly indicated Connor's guilt. Betty's family endured a painful wait for justice. They found it hard to accept that someone she had trusted, who had been in her life for many years, had betrayed her in such a devastating manner. Her mother and sister remembered conversations where Betty had shared her unhappiness and her desire to move on, never expecting that things would turn out so tragically. Betty's friends played an important role in the case. Several of them served as witnesses, sharing valuable testimony and information that strengthened the investigation. They supported her family in their quest for justice, ensuring that the responsible individual would be held accountable. Connor Bowman was charged with second-degree murder in the summer of 2023 in the death of Betty Bowman, but a grand jury indicted him on first-degree murder in January 2024. Connor Bowman's trial has not happened yet. The law enforcement is still collecting evidence and getting ready for the court case. However, a trial date has not been established. Larissa Rodriguez grew up in a humble but close-knit family. Her parents were modest and reserved. They raised her with strong values of integrity, a strong work ethic, and family loyalty. From an early age, Larissa showed remarkable discipline. She trained in gymnastics, later graduated with a degree in sports science, and worked as a trainer and instructor at a fitness club. She led a healthy lifestyle, avoided harmful habits, meticulously cared for her well-being. She had only one serious relationship with Luis Antonio Garnica, who became her first partner and later her husband. To the family, he seemed quiet and polite. Larissa believed in the ideal of a strong family, and despite strains in their relationship, she remained committed to preserving the marriage. Luis came from a well-off background. His father had served as mayor of Pontal, and Luis himself was trained in medicine. But behind that veneer of success, he was self-centered and calculating. According to Larissa's relatives, at the beginning of their relationship, he had no steady income and depended on Larissa's mother, who sent him home, cooked meals over time. Despite having a diploma, his finances never improved, and he struggled to support two parallel lives, his official marriage and a secret relationship. His standing among Larissa's friends and family deteriorated. He grew increasingly withdrawn, distant, and indifferent. Even during Larissa's mother's final days, he visited only when forced. In the last months of the marriage, Luis was emotionally detached, cold, and often degraded his wife about her appearance, avoiding any real communication. Despite her efforts to reconcile, he continued to move further away, ignoring the obvious signs of their relationship's crisis. Elizabeth Arabaza, Luis's mother, played a pivotal role in this story. At 68, she appeared quiet and unassuming, but in reality, she was a manipulator with a troubling history. Her former husband and her daughter claimed she had a gambling problem and was deeply in debt. There were suspicions surrounding her involvement in the mysterious death of a relative connected through financial dealings. She often asked acquaintances for money and was suspected of selling others' jewelry. Her behavior within the Garnica family drew mixed opinions. With Larissa, she maintained the image of a caring mother-in-law, yet she regularly shared confidential information with her son and withheld crucial details from her daughter-in-law. Over time, it became clear she had played a decisive role in tearing the family apart and setting the stage for the tragic events that followed. These three figures, Larissa, Louise, and Elizabeth, became the central players in a chain of events whose outcomes were irreversible. In the spring of 2025, tensions between Larissa and Louise escalated dramatically. Their conflicts had become a regular occurrence, and any remaining trust was shattered. Louise's behavior grew increasingly distant. He often claimed to be working late or on call, but in reality, he was frequently meeting with another woman named Letitia. Larissa didn't know the woman's name at first, but she began to suspect he was seeing someone else, especially after noticing odd changes in his routine and his frequent irritation for no clear reason. Her suspicions were confirmed after she discreetly followed him one evening in mid-March. Larissa spotted Louise heading toward Letitia's house on a night he claimed to be working an overnight shift. Not long after that, she found personal items in his car, along with a medical-grade anesthetic, which clearly indicated a secretive relationship. She confided in Elisabette, her mother-in-law, hoping for understanding. Instead, Elisabette quickly told Louise about the confrontation and criticized Larissa for spying on him. Rather than receiving comfort, Larissa was told that being unfaithful is just something men do. Larissa didn't act on impulse. Despite her personal disappointment, she still tried to preserve her family. According to her father, she wanted to have a calm conversation with Louise and find a peaceful resolution. Over the next few days, she spoke privately with close friends about the possibility of divorce, but asked them not to get involved. Meanwhile, a friend offered her temporary use of an unoccupied apartment to help her take a step back and think things through. On March 15, 2025, Larissa tells Louise of her decision to end the marriage. She also confirmed her intentions to a trusted friend. Her goal was to reduce tension and prepare for a respectful separation. The following day, March 16th, Elisabette Arabata began researching highly toxic substances online. That same day, she offered Larissa homemade soup. Larissa, unaware of any danger, accepted the meal. Within hours, she began experiencing severe gastrointestinal symptoms, including cramps and nausea. Despite feeling unwell, Larissa assumed the discomfort was caused by stress or possibly spoiled food. On March 18th, Larissa once again opened up to a close friend, expressing how drained she felt physically and emotionally. She said her energy was slipping away and shared her concern that Louise continued to avoid any meaningful conversation. At the same time, Elisabette, his mother, became unusually attentive, bringing food, initiating frequent visits, and insisting on helping Larissa, despite previously criticizing her for wanting to leave the marriage. By March 19th, Larissa confided in a relative about her worsening condition. She described sudden chills, weakness, abdominal pain, and an overwhelming sense of dread. She noted that she had never experienced anything like it before, and that the symptoms had persisted for several days. That message would become one of the last times she discussed her health. On March 20th, Larissa told her father she no longer saw a future in the marriage. Though she was still hoping to avoid a public fallout, she wanted the divorce to be amicable, if possible. That day, Elisabette seemed calm but continued bringing over food. Larissa, although feeling unwell, didn't yet suspect a link between the meals and her condition. She assumed her health issues stemmed from emotional stress. Then came March 21st. Elisabette arrived again with homemade soup. Larissa's condition took a drastic turn for the worse. By late that evening, she stopped responding to calls and messages. A few hours later, the devastating news came. She had passed away. On the morning of March 22nd, 2025, Louise reported that he had found his wife unconscious in their apartment. He claimed he'd just returned from a night shift, walked in, and found Larissa lying on the floor. According to his account, he immediately began CPR and called emergency services. However, discrepancies between his story and the actual evidence began to surface within hours of the investigation. One critical detail was a message Louise sent to Leticia. At 10:25 m.m., he texted Leticia to tell her that Larissa had passed away. Just 9 minutes later, at 10:34 m., paramedics arrived. Yet when they entered, Louise was still performing resuscitation efforts, claiming Larissa was showing signs of life. The medical team quickly determined otherwise. She was already in a state of rigor mortis, making revival impossible. Emergency personnel documented that her body was cold, with no pulse or breathing, and her skin showed clear signs consistent with an extended time of death. When police arrived at the scene, one of the first things they noted was Louise's insistence on a rapid cremation. He didn't notify Larissa's family right away about her passing and took it upon himself to begin arranging the necessary paperwork for cremation. This immediately raised red flags for investigators, especially since Larissa's cultural background strictly followed burial traditions, with cremation never being considered. At the scene, officers noticed that the environment had been tampered with, bed sheets had been stripped, rolled up towels with what appeared to be reddish stains were found nearby, and the laundry basket contained items possibly used for cleanup. The paramedic examining Larissa's body took note of undigested food in her stomach. This detail would later become a critical piece of evidence, prompting a full toxicology analysis. The initial assumption of a sudden cardiac event began to shift toward concerns about a possible poisoning. Louise's behavior on the day Larissa died seemed artificial, as if he were acting to make her death look like a sudden accident. The timeline, the messages he sent, and his behavior before and after emergency services arrived painted a picture that seemed increasingly rehearsed. At first glance, Louise seemed like a distraught husband caught in a crisis, but as investigators dug deeper, examining documents, message logs, and expert findings, the surface narrative started to unravel. Attention shifted from simply understanding what happened to examining who may have played a role in the moments immediately after Larissa's life ended. Following the official announcement of Larissa's death, Louise came under increasing scrutiny. Within just 24 hours of the incident, his actions raised serious concerns. The day after Larissa's passing, attempted financial transactions were discovered using her bank accounts. Louise used her debit card to purchase items at a pharmacy and attempted to withdraw cash from an ATM. Several of these transactions were flagged and declined due to suspicious activity. One attempt to access her savings account failed because of automatic security blocks. Later, bank officials confirmed that the attempted transactions originated from devices registered to Louise. At a local bank branch in Pontal, a teller reported an unusual request. Viviani, Louise's sister, attempted to obtain account information for Larissa. Despite having no legal authority to access those records, Larissa's account was registered in a different region, and Viviani's attempt to retrieve private financial data without a formal power of attorney was officially logged as an unauthorized access attempt. This incident immediately drew the attention of investigators. Meanwhile, Larissa's family, especially her brother and father, pushed for a thorough investigation into the circumstances surrounding her death. Troubled by rumors and inconsistencies, Larissa's brother sought legal counsel from attorney. Consultations with legal representatives began on March 24th, 2 days after her death. Despite online speculation suggesting Larissa may have taken her own life, her loved ones firmly rejected that possibility. According to those close to her, Larissa had no history of mental health struggles, maintained an active lifestyle, was in therapy, and had clear plans for her future, including filing for divorce. The attorney hired by Larissa's family demanded that no cremation take place until a full toxicological analysis was completed. This move proved critical to the case. The pathologist ordered a comprehensive examination, including toxicology screenings. While the initial exam did not pinpoint an immediate cause of death, the lab tests became central to developing the leading theory. At the same time, investigators focused on digital evidence. Combing through text messages, GPS data, and call logs, recovered chats between Louise, Viviani, and others provided deeper insight. One particularly telling exchange showed Viviani advising Louise to be cautious with their phones and not to confuse devices. In another message, she reminded him to mention a supposed history of heart conditions in Larissa's family when speaking to authorities. These texts were interpreted as an attempt to shape a false narrative and create a medically plausible explanation for what had occurred. While the investigation remained active, the family's lawyer successfully petitioned to freeze all of Larissa's financial accounts and restrict access to her assets. Authorities across relevant agencies were notified. These legal safeguards were essential in preventing further unauthorized actions by Louise and those allegedly working with him. At this point, investigators completely ruled out end her own life. Every move Louise and Viviani made following Larissa's passing appeared calculated, aimed at reducing exposure and covering their tracks. These patterns were sufficient to launch the formal phase of criminal proceedings. Roughly 1 month before Larissa passed away, another family member died under mysterious circumstances, Natalia, daughter of Elisabetti. At the time, the incident received no public attention. Natalia lived in Pontal with a long-term partner in a domestic relationship. Shortly before her death, she had a major falling out with her mother. Elisabetti strongly opposed Natalia's plans to start a family and become a parent. Their arguments centered around inheritance issues and shares in the family business. Following the disagreement, Natalia's partner left the house, leaving her alone with Elisabetti, something relatives later described as highly unusual. In the days that followed, Natalia complained of feeling increasingly unwell. However, Elisabetti never sought medical help or contacted emergency services. Instead, she reached out to Louise and Viviani, who were in another city at the time. The drive from Ribeirão Preto to Pontal takes approximately 40 minutes. During this time, Natalia remained without assistance. By the time Louise and Viviani arrived, Natalia's condition had deteriorated significantly. She was later taken to a hospital where she died. Eyewitnesses claimed that despite his medical training, Louise didn't advocate for emergency care and seemed more focused on when the death certificate would be issued. This detail was documented and became the subject of further investigation. Initially, Natalia's death was classified as natural, but as Larissa's case unfolded, new findings began to cast serious doubt on that conclusion. One red flag was the unexplained death of Natalia's dog. 2 weeks before the tragedy, relatives reported that the dog had no known health issues. Authorities approved the exhumation of the pet for toxicology testing based on the theory that poison might have been tested on the animal. Natalia's father, Antonio, revealed during questioning that Elisabetti was facing serious financial problems. He stated Elisabetti had debts exceeding 300,000 reais, some of which were linked to gambling. Natalia held a 16% share in the family business, which, because she had no dependent children, passed directly to her mother upon her death. Antonio also testified that not long before she passed, Natalia had mentioned receiving threats from her mother regarding her personal life. Elisabetti's alleged efforts to secure full control over those assets led to major tensions with her ex-husband. Further disturbing details emerged about Elisabetti's past. Years earlier, a friend recalled a strange episode. After having tea with Elisabetti, she experienced sharp abdominal pain, followed by unconsciousness. Emergency care saved her, and doctors later suspected a toxic substance had been involved. However, that case was never formally investigated. As Larissa's story gained public attention, more people connected to the Garnica family began stepping forward, sharing concerns about Elisabetti's behavior. After reviewing the series of suspicious patterns, investigators reached a preliminary conclusion. Natalia may have been the first confirmed victim, and her dog potentially part of a test run for what followed. The combination of poisoning, delayed medical response, concealed symptoms, and a motive rooted in inheritance formed a disturbing picture. From this point forward, the case took on a much broader scope. A deeper analysis of these incidents revealed a consistent pattern in Elisabetti's financial behavior. She repeatedly sought new sources of income, pressured those close to her, and manipulated legal access to property and assets. After Natalia and Larissa passed, these tactics intensified in the context of mounting debts and financial instability. Her motives became a central focus of the investigation. Amid the dual investigations into the deaths of Larissa and Natalia, law enforcement began uncovering information that hinted at additional potentially criminal episodes linked to Elisabetti Arabati. The case involved a woman who had been friendly with Elisabetti. Years after an odd incident, she finally spoke out. Following a tea visit at Elisabetti's home, she suddenly felt dizzy, nauseous, and disoriented. Elisabetti offered her a headache remedy, a blue capsule. She took the pill, but was later hospitalized that night with suspected poisoning. Doctors documented toxic exposure to an unknown substance, but the woman never filed a report at the time. She later admitted she was afraid of becoming entangled in legal battles. Eventually, she reached out to Larissa's family attorney after media reports surfaced about possible poisonings. Yet another concerning event came to light. Elizabeth had attempted to obtain power of attorney from a woman expecting to receive court-ordered compensation. The woman, alarmed by Elizabeth's persistence, later told investigators she feared she might have been a future target. Her statement was formally included in the case files. According to law enforcement, a clear pattern was beginning to emerge in Elizabeth's actions. She would first establish close relationships with financially stable women, earn their trust, and shortly afterward, they would suffer sudden and unexplained health issues. Given these accounts, investigators began pursuing a new theory. They might be dealing with a series of connected incidents rather than isolated ones. Law enforcement officials issued a public appeal, urging anyone who had experienced suspicious behavior from Elisabetta Arabazza to contact authorities. Once the toxicology reports came in, the investigation entered a decisive phase. Forensic specialists confirmed the presence of a compound derived from chumbinho, a banned toxic substance in Larissa's system. This finding was pivotal. Until then, Louise and Elizabeth had claimed that Larissa passed away from natural causes, but the chemical evidence completely debunked their story. Another critical piece of the puzzle came from surveillance footage at the residential complex. Security cameras showed that, on the morning of March 22nd, Louise arrived at the apartment later than he had claimed, and Viviani arrived shortly before emergency services were called. These details directly contradicted their official statements. Taken together, the presence of a toxic compound, suspicious online searches, misleading explanations, tampered evidence, and timeline inconsistencies formed a clear chain of evidence. Investigators concluded that Larissa's death was not a random event, but a carefully coordinated act carried out by multiple individuals. The evidence didn't just suggest wrongdoing, it presented a legally viable case of premeditated criminal activity. By mid-April 2025, the investigation reached the stage of formal charges. Based on forensic data, digital correspondence, and verified discrepancies in witness accounts, police filed charges against three primary individuals: Elisabetta Arabazza, Luis Garnica, and his sister, Viviani Garnica. The main charge involved the intentional death of Larissa Rodriguez through poisoning. Investigators determined that Elisabetta had prepared Larissa's meals in the final days of her life, actively researched toxic substances, created a plan to conceal the act, and coordinated the actions of her family members. Luis was charged as an accomplice. He was aware of his mother's intentions, failed to intervene, concealed signs of poisoning, and helped destroy evidence afterward. He was also the one who pushed for rapid cremation, a move that could have eliminated the chance of detecting any toxic substances. Viviani was also named as an accomplice. Her role included coordination with her brother, erasing digital traces, attempting to access the victim's bank accounts, and helping conceal key details surrounding the incident. Recovered messages from her phone confirmed that she knew about Larissa's death in advance and was involved in planning how to speak with law enforcement and medical professionals. Simultaneously, a separate investigation was launched into the circumstances surrounding Natalia's passing. Another contributing factor was the earlier death of Natalia's dog, which had also raised alarms. While formal charges in Natalia's case had not yet been filed, the evidence was placed in a separate investigative file. The charges against all three individuals were formally submitted to the district attorney's office. Each was summoned for questioning. Following the interrogation, both Elisabetta and Louise were taken into custody. Viviani was placed under travel restrictions, required to remain within the region, and ordered to surrender her passport. Meanwhile, the court approved a request to seize Garnica family assets and freeze all accounts tied to the suspects. The case sparked significant public interest. Journalists, advocacy groups, and legal experts began a national conversation about the shortcomings in addressing domestic aggression, legal loopholes in women's protection, and missed warning signs. Many pointed out that the tragedy might have been avoided had social services intervened earlier. At this point, the charges have been formally established, and the investigation has completed the collection of core evidence. Next, the trial will proceed, with the expectation of revealing the whole truth to the public. Roberta Scagliassi grew up in the small town of Vasto, in the province of Chieti, Abruzzo, southeastern Italy. Her parents, along with most of her extended family, also lived there. She shared a particularly close bond with her mother. They confided in each other and were always in touch. From a young age, Roberta was known for her outgoing nature, kind heart, and cheerful personality. She excelled as a student and developed a deep passion for cooking, particularly showcasing her talent in baking pies and cakes. She was well liked by her peers and cherished spending time with her many friends. After completing public school, Roberta enrolled in Italy's School of Hospitality and Culinary Arts. At the age of 20, she began working at the most renowned bakery in her hometown, owned by the Lello family. Every family member participated in the bakery's operations, and Roberta became close friends with Fabio Di Lello, the younger son, who was her age and worked alongside her. Spending so much time together, their friendship quickly blossomed into a romantic relationship. Both families were very supportive of they. Roberta's parents took an immediate liking to Fabio, and Fabio's parents admired Roberta for her strong work ethic and sense of responsibility. By the age of 25, Roberta and Fabio had moved in together, sharing a rented apartment while saving money to buy their own home. Fabio, a passionate and dedicated soccer player since childhood, had achieved notable success. He served as the captain of the city's soccer team and performed impressively in amateur tournaments. In 2014, he made his debut in Serie D, the highest amateur soccer division under the Italian National League Federation. In 2015, Roberta and Fabio achieved a milestone in their lives. That autumn, they celebrated their wedding with a grand ceremony and moved into a spacious and cozy house of their own. They were overjoyed and excited about their future, making plans they were eager to fulfill, plans that would tragically never come to fruition. On the morning of Friday, July the 1st, 2016, Roberta, then 34, called her mother as she did every day. She suggested having dinner that evening at her parents' house, intending to gather everyone there to share exciting news. Keeping the announcement a surprise, she planned to reveal it at dinner and agreed with her mother to prepare the meal and set the table together. Around 2 p.m., Roberta left her house on her scooter, heading to her parents' home, just a few kilometers away, a trip that usually took about 10 minutes. Tragically, Roberta never arrived. While passing through one of the busiest intersections in town and carefully obeying traffic rules, a Fiat Punto sped through a red light from the opposite lane and collided violently with her scooter. The car then crashed into another vehicle. The force of the impact threw Roberta into a metal pole and onto the sidewalk. She sustained a severe, traumatic brain injury, lost a significant amount of blood, and was barely alive by the time emergency services arrived. Paramedics were astonished that Roberta was still alive, given the extent of her injuries. She was rushed to the nearest hospital and immediately taken into surgery. Despite the efforts of the top surgeons, who worked tirelessly for nearly an hour, her injuries were simply too severe. Roberta passed away without regaining consciousness. The drivers of the other two vehicles involved in the crash suffered only minor injuries and did not require hospitalization. The driver of the Fiat Punto was identified as 21-year-old local resident Italo De Lisa. He remained at the scene visibly shaken and did not attempt to flee. He waited for the police to arrive, cooperated fully, and explained what had happened. He admitted he had briefly taken his eyes off the road and failed to notice the traffic light turning red. By the time he realized, it was too late to avoid the collision. After hitting Roberta's scooter, he panicked, swerved into oncoming traffic, and struck another car. He willingly handed over his documents and underwent a toxicology screening at the hospital, which confirmed that he was not under the influence of alcohol or any banned substances. Witnesses and officers noted his profound remorse. Upon learning later that Roberta had not survived, he was overcome with distress and nearly collapsed. Fabio was the first to hear the devastating news. He rushed to the hospital just minutes after his wife, Roberta, had been brought in. In the hallway, he broke down, crying and praying, desperately pleading for updates from every doctor and nurse who entered or left the operating room. About 30 minutes later, the surgeon came out and, after a pause, informed Fabio that they had done everything possible, but Roberta could not be saved. Fabio's reaction was heartbreaking. Stunned and in denial, he repeatedly begged to see Roberta, clinging to the hope that there had been some mistake. But the truth was inescapable. She had passed away. As the reality sunk in, Fabio was overtaken by grief and anger. Overwhelmed, he reportedly wanted to confront the person responsible immediately. Hospital staff had to physically restrain him and escort him to a private room where he was given a sedative to calm down. At the same time, Italo, the driver responsible for the crash, was deeply shaken, repeatedly saying he didn't deserve forgiveness. Meanwhile, Roberta's parents were growing anxious. Their daughter was overdue and not answering her phone. They began calling Fabio, who initially didn't pick up. When he finally answered, he tearfully broke the tragic news. Within 15 minutes, both Roberta's and Fabio's families gathered at the hospital, struggling to process the devastating loss. Their vibrant and joyful lives, filled with dreams and plans, had been shattered in an instant. Instead of celebrating Roberta and Fabio's upcoming anniversary, they were now faced with the unimaginable task of saying goodbye to her. Roberta was laid to rest on July 3, 2016, just 2 months before what would have been her and Fabio's first wedding anniversary. The farewell took place in the same church where they had recently pledged their love and commitment. The priest who officiated their wedding also led this deeply somber memorial service. The small church overflowed with mourners. So many people came that not everyone could fit inside. Roberta was beloved and well-respected in her community, and friends, neighbors, and colleagues gathered to honor her memory and support her grieving family. The tragedy left the entire town in shock. Few could believe she was truly gone. The man responsible for the fatal crash, Italo, did not flee the scene. He cooperated fully and underwent medical testing at the hospital. He was completely sober and had no history of mental illness or emotional instability. The crash happened at a busy intersection, equipped with multiple traffic cameras. The police reviewed footage from 4 different angles, clearly capturing the accident. Investigators also retrieved surveillance videos showing the routes both drivers took prior to the crash. The footage revealed that both vehicles had adhered to traffic laws and speed limits. However, at the crucial moment, Italo failed to stop at a red light. He drove through the intersection, colliding with the scooter Roberta was riding. After hitting Roberta, Italo's Fiat Punto struck another car coming from the opposite direction. Fortunately, the driver of the second car was not seriously injured, and his vehicle damage was covered by insurance, so he did not pursue legal action. Tragically, Roberta's injuries were far too severe to be treated. Italo expressed his deep regret, claiming he had been distracted for just a moment. Despite his regret, nothing could ease the pain of Roberta's loved ones, particularly Fabio, who struggled to suppress his anger toward the man responsible. The 21-year-old driver, Italo, was arrested and formally charged with involuntary harm, causing fatal injuries. He was placed in pre-trial detention while awaiting the court proceedings. He did not contest the charges, declaring that he was ready to accept any punishment imposed. Fabio closely followed every development in the investigation. He meticulously reviewed all available evidence and met with detectives daily in his search for answers and any additional leads. Fabio strongly rejected the official findings, convinced that Italo or his family had influenced the authorities to minimize his responsibility for the accident. Fabio believed the crash was caused by substance use and was determined to keep the case in the public eye. Fabio organized protests and marches, demanding full accountability from Italo for the fatal accident. Many people, especially those who had known Roberta, supported him. Fabio also launched an aggressive online campaign against Italo and his family, accusing him of intentional misconduct, banned substance use, and claiming that his relatives had bribed officials to tamper with the toxicology report. His social media posts, filled with accusations and cries for justice, appeared daily. On July 15, 2016, Fabio organized a memorial march for Roberta, attended by hundreds, carrying her photos and signs demanding justice. Fabio's rhetoric grew more intense, threatening further demonstrations and even suggesting, during emotional outbursts, that he might take matters into his own hands if the authorities failed to act. His increasingly confrontational tone stirred public outrage but also alarmed Italo's family, who began fearing for their safety. Fabio's hostility toward Italo was evident as he worked to sway public opinion against him. Fabio's actions hinted at a willingness to disregard the law to seek retribution. In response, Italo's family filed for a court order to protect themselves, citing Fabio's harassment and threats. The case remained under investigation with incomplete evidence, but the situation was becoming dangerously volatile and required urgent legal action. On July 20th, Fabio was issued a court order barring him from accusing Italo of a crime, inciting hatred, posting harmful content online, or encouraging hostility toward Italo or his family. Fabio complied, but abruptly withdrew from public advocacy, leaving others unsettled by his silence. Every day, Fabio visited the grave of his late wife, Roberta, bringing fresh flowers. He spent hours there, sometimes standing silently, other times kneeling, crying, or praying. His family, hoping he just needed time to grieve, chose not to intervene, but his behavior only escalated. Fabio erected a memorial at the accident site and turned Roberta's gravesite into a detailed tribute with photos from their happiest moments. He began spending entire days at the cemetery. He quit soccer, his lifelong passion, and stopped going to work. Nothing seemed to matter to Fabio anymore. His life revolved around the flower-covered grave. He ate little, lost significant weight, and looked pale and exhausted. Within weeks, he appeared drastically older, withdrawn from others. Fabio grew disconnected from reality. One morning, cemetery staff found Fabio at Roberta's grave before opening hours. He had climbed the fence overnight, saying he needed to be close to her. He told relatives he couldn't bear staying in their home, filled with memories of Roberta. Only at her gravesite did he feel any peace. Fabio spoke to her as though she was still alive, refusing to refer to her in the past tense. Fabio's older brother suggested a brief trip to Rome to help him clear his head, but Fabio refused, insisting he couldn't leave Roberta alone in the cemetery. This was a clear sign that Fabio needed more than the support of loved ones. He required urgent professional psychiatric care. Fabio's brother and other family members dismissed his concerning words and erratic behavior, believing time would heal him. Unfortunately, they were tragically wrong. Meanwhile, the parents of Italo, who was still in custody, hired a top attorney to defend their son. The lawyer was confident from the start, highlighting that Italo had no prior criminal record, rarely broke traffic laws, and tested sober at the time of the incident. While the attorney admitted that running a red light was a mistake, he argued there was no evidence to support serious charges, such as premeditated intent. He also pointed out that Italo had followed the speed limit throughout his drive, and it remained unclear what had distracted him. To support their case, the defense presented character testimonials from Italo's school and workplace, as well as evidence of his volunteer work in environmental causes and his enrollment in firefighter training courses. Italo had planned to dedicate himself to public service after finishing his certification exams. During the trial, the defense submitted surveillance footage showing Roberta on her scooter without a helmet, which violated safety regulations. The attorney argued that wearing a helmet could have lessened the severity of her injuries and perhaps even saved her life. Considering this footage, Italo's clean record, and Roberta's safety oversight, the court modified his pre-trial conditions. He was released under judicial supervision shortly before Christmas 2016, with the final decision scheduled for February 2017. Other than a few restrictions, Italo resumed a normal life. When Fabio learned that the man responsible for the accident had been released, he was consumed by rage. In court, he shouted and tried to physically confront Italo and Italo's attorney. Family members struggled to hold him back, and the judge ordered him to be removed from the courtroom. After Italo's release, Fabio became sleepless, angry, and withdrawn. He spent countless hours by Roberta's grave, talking to her as if she was still alive. Despite Fabio's worsening mental state, his family did not seek professional help. They thought he just needed more time to heal. When they suggested seeing a mental health specialist, Fabio reacted with hostility. He began accusing the justice system of being corrupt and incapable of delivering a fair outcome. When Italo was allowed to await trial out of custody, Fabio completely lost faith in the law. He decided to take matters into his own hands, but didn't reveal his plans to anyone. His behavior shifted noticeably. He became increasingly secretive and withdrawn. Fabio had an interest in firearms dating back to his youth. He regularly visited shooting ranges and, in 2006, obtained a firearm license, purchasing a 9mm pistol that he kept secured in a safe at home. Now consumed by thoughts of vengeance, he started handling the weapon often, convinced that it was his only means of achieving justice. As New Year's approached, Fabio's social media activity took a dark turn. He began posting about justice, revenge, and reflections on life's meaning, lamenting how his own life had lost purpose. These posts were deeply troubling, but sadly, they went unnoticed. In January, Fabio began secretly following Italo to avoid drawing attention. Fabio observed his daily routines, the places he visited, and the people he interacted with. Using this information, Fabio devised a plan. On February 1, 2017, he took a loaded pistol and went to a bar on Via Perth, a location Italo frequented and close to his home. Fabio entered the bar to confirm Italo was there. After spotting him, he left quietly and found a discreet location nearby to wait. Around 9:30 p.m., Italo exited the bar, chatted briefly with friends, and was about to head home. At that moment, Fabio confronted him. Italo sensed something was wrong, and both men froze briefly. Then Fabio pulled out his pistol and fired 3 shots at close range. The first shot struck Italo in the abdomen, the second near his heart, and the third, a headshot, ensured there was no chance of survival. Fabio, an experienced marksman, executed the act with precision, leaving no room for error. Afterward, Fabio walked calmly to his car. Witnesses, shocked by what they had seen, were too afraid to intervene, knowing he likely wouldn't hesitate to use the weapon again. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but Italo was pronounced dead at the scene. Police interviewed witnesses and were able to identify Fabio as the perpetrator. When officers went to his house, he wasn't there. Fabio's family, upon learning what happened, informed police of where he was likely headed. Authorities intercepted him on his way to the cemetery. Fabio had planned to end his life at Roberta's grave after what he believed was an act of justice over her death. However, police arrived before he could carry out the plan. He didn't resist arrest, showed no emotion, and openly admitted to the crime. At the police station, Fabio broke down. He spoke of his intense love for his wife, Roberta, and his anger with the justice system for allowing Italo to walk free after the car accident that killed her. Then he revealed an even deeper motive. Roberta had been pregnant. Though it was still early in the pregnancy, they had discovered the news just one day before the fatal crash. Roberta had planned to surprise their families with the announcement during dinner, a moment that never came. The accident had taken both her and their unborn child. Fabio said his actions were retaliation for the loss of not just his wife, but also the future they were building. He expressed that he had nothing left to live for, wanting only to reunite with his family. After his arrest, Fabio was sent for psychiatric evaluation. Doctors diagnosed him with acute psychological trauma caused by profound grief. However, the court determined that Fabio had acted deliberately and with full awareness of his actions. He was charged with first-degree premeditated murder. While awaiting trial, Fabio made several attempts to harm himself and was placed under strict supervision. On March 24, 2017, he was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Fabio showed no emotion during the verdict, appearing detached from the moment. His family and legal team appealed the sentence, which was later reduced to 20 years. In prison, Fabio reportedly turned to religion for some solace, but never fully recovered from the loss of his wife and unborn child.